Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and with that, we will start with the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the roll call of the board, let the record reflect that our president, Stacy Roman, is absent this evening. Tim Kinnear, vice president, I'll be the acting chair tonight. I know there's often a lot of times about state laws that we like and that we don't like. This is one where I wish state law would allow us to use technology. We could greatly use the voice of Ms. Romerman tonight, but state law will not allow us to utilize that technology. So we'll proceed with the quorum with the four of us here tonight. For the agenda, I'd like to propose two changes and then entertain a motion for the revised agenda. I'd like to call for a separate vote on the consent agenda, item L. And note that item number 2, sorry, it's item number 3 on the business agenda. We will pull that one from the agenda tonight. Are there any other changes in the agenda that we need to consider?
No other change.
With that in mind, I entertain a motion as amended to adopt the agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. McGowan?
Yes.
The chair votes yes as well. Consent agenda. All of the following items, those items of a routine nature normally approved at board meetings, will be approved by one vote unless any board member desires to have a separate vote on any or all of these items. The consent agenda consists of a discussion, consideration, and action on the following items. And for this exercise, it will be A through K. Skip L, we'll come back to that in items M through double S. Any discussion on any of these items that you all would like to have?
No discussion, just a comment that I'm super excited to see all these MOUs keep coming through for different opportunities with our Career Connect programs. I think it's amazing how you guys are reaching out and pulling all these partners in to give our high school kids more and more experiences moving forward out of high school. So kudos to everybody that applies to. I think that I love seeing that on here. So just a comment.
Absolutely, well said. With that in mind, I'll entertain a motion to approve those items mentioned.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
The chair votes yes as well. And a separate vote for item L, only because if I understand correctly and look at it, it exceeds our threshold for those items that are part of the consent agenda. So memoranda of understanding and agenda with Tulsa Community College for concurrent education programs as outlined in attachment L, and authorize the superintendent or designee to execute the agreement. Motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Second.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
The chair votes yes as well. Information reports. Do we have anyone to speak for USTA? UCTA, Ms. Churchill.
Vice President Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, members of the board, we would like to thank the board for the challenging year and 5% retention stipends. We are still receiving concerns from teachers about the Delta variant, how it can affect our students, and our inability to require masks in schools. We were excited to welcome over 100 new teachers and feed them lunch at the new teacher luncheon. Summer certainly felt short, but we are very excited to meet our new students.
Thank you, Ms. Churchill. Under hearings and correspondence, do we have any communications? Opportunity for comments from the audience regarding the agenda. I believe we have one speaker signed up for that. Is that correct?
Yes, Mrs. Hollowell.
All right, Mrs. Hollowell, you're welcome to come up and make your presentation. I'll go ahead and read the rules while you're coming up. The rules for this section of the agenda are as follows. Speakers should identify themselves. Each speaker is given a maximum of 3 minutes. Total time allotted to this item is 30 minutes. Under Board Policy 1800, the Board of Education President has the discretion to determine if topics are relevant enough to be heard and to establish the order of presentations. This includes the right to interrupt this section and move on to the next item. Don't think that will be an issue, but regardless, Ms. Hollowell, please proceed.
Thank you. I don't normally do this, so I'm really nervous. So this is new to me. So last year there was a mask mandate, and I didn't like the mask mandate. And I'm grateful to Governor Stitt. And I want to give lots of praise to Governor Stitt and the people that helped him not do a mandate for the vaccine and for all the vaccines and for this mask mandate, which I think is really, really bad. And I hated it last year, and I didn't say nothing, but I really, really wanted to. And the mask, it causes oxygen deprivation, it causes brain damage, it causes carbon dioxide poisoning, it causes staph infections, it destroys your immune system, and the protection is 0, and it harms your communication signals. And these phony politicians will say you need to wear these masks, and even the people in this room, they walked in here with no mask. And then they sit down in front of the camera, they'll have the mask on. It's phony baloney, it protects you from nothing. The whole purpose of these masks is to create fear. Fear is from the devil. This Delta variant they're talking about, that's so everyone's so afraid of. This comes from the Delta muscle where everyone's getting the vaccine. Is from the vaccine. The people who are getting sick with the Delta, almost all of them is from the vaccine, and there are people shedding the vaccine. The vaccine doesn't make any sense. It's a spike protein, and the spike protein is injected into your body, and with a replicator, and that goes into, it travels to your bone marrow, to your blood vessels, to your muscles. And the spike protein will kill everybody that takes this. This is a genocide for people to even be thinking that we need to have this mandatory vaccine is insanity. 100 years from now, people who are surviving this is going to say, this was nuts. What were these people thinking? The vaccine kills your immune system. We know that. We know there are proteins that eat your brain from that vaccine that gives you dementia. We know that it sterilizes people. People having this vaccine are not going to have kids. We know that. We know that it causes heart attacks. We know that it causes blood clots. Young, healthy kids are having blood clots and heart attacks. It causes neurological tics. Young people having tics and dying. They don't want to live anymore being weird, having all this jerking crap going on. Not being able to walk, it causes paralysis. People are getting leukemia, horrible rashes. In fact, in one weekend, they had 45,000 people die from this vaccine at one reporting Verify. And they're taking it off. The people don't want you to know about this who are pushing this vaccine. And you think, this Dr. Frankenstein is who we're listening to. And Dr. Bill Gates, who openly want the population to be reduced. You all need to hear this. And it's the 666, it's the mark of the beast. The Bible warns us to not take it. This is biblical times here. We need to say no to this thing and no to any of these masks. Don't participate in any of this. We need to trust our immune system, our masks, our medicines and therapies that work wonderful to address this if you get sick. And most likely you're not going to get sick. You have like a chance of dying is, like about 0.01. And then there's medicines that you can take, and they're suppressing the medicines. We know that there's the Math Plus protocol. We know that there's ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and they say that they don't want you to know about that, but it works really good. And with the vitamin C and the zinc, and it works. There's no reason for anyone to be afraid. There's no reason for anyone to have these masks on. There's no reason for anyone to even be talking about these vaccines. It's just lunacy.
If you will, please. I did not start a clock here, but if you wouldn't mind wrapping up the next 30 seconds, we'd appreciate that.
Okay. I would like to, for us to be very grateful to Governor Stitt and Senator Dom and those other people that have said we're not going to do this mask mandate, we're not going to do the vaccine. We need to give them lots and lots of praise because they're saving our lives and our kids' lives. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We move on to the business agenda. First item under instruction. Consider and take action on approval of the 2021-2022 school calendar based on the 1,080-hour requirement. Dr. Alexis.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnear, board members. This is something that we routinely do every year, and I have to do this, or we have to do this, because we've got to either declare that we're going to be on a 1,080-year calendar or a 176 instructional days. Don't hold me to that number, because we have not been on that calendar number for quite some time. So I just need to bring this to the board for your consideration, and then if it is approved, I will notify the State Department of Education that it is open for this school year.
Ms. Conjurine, same as always, bring this to us all every year.
That is correct.
Any questions? Motion to approve?
Second.
No. I'm asking for.
Oh, move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
The chair will vote yes as well. Consider and take action on the recommended updated safe return and continuity of services plan for the 2021-2022 school year. Mr. Bushier.
Yes, Vice President, Mr. Kinnear, Board, Dr. Hartzler, we have put out the latest version of our safe return and continuity of services plan. I have to get that out because we've changed the names a couple times to meet some of the guidelines that we're required to meet. So a couple things. We have met, our last meeting was 12 days ago. Several things have happened in those 12 days. So obviously, as we've stated before, that this plan is meant to be fluid and nimble, as we've quoted in the plan, to discuss what changes might need to make in our mitigation or planning for what's happening within our community. We posted the plan on the website on Wednesday and have had lots of feedback from the community. I would say a lot, not considering the size of our community, it's not a whole lot, but we appreciate the comments that folks have made. It's one of those things where as people bring things to your attention, it's a great opportunity for us to review some of the considerations that we've made, and so we appreciate their input. I will tell you from the previous meetings to the last meeting that we had, there have been multiple changes. I know the committee members well enough to know that many of them have actually changed in their own mind. It's been said that nobody flips their opinion more than Charlie Bushy head, but I think there's some people maybe competing with me on this one. So this is one of those things that, like I said, we've listened to the input from folks. We feel like we had a good representative team. We are watching this every day. In fact, I think as recent as 6:40 this evening, Ms. Calvin and I are discussing Meet the Teacher. We realize we have a few days to make a decision on that because we know some of the other districts are going to virtual or taking away the possibility of in-person Meet the Teacher. That's something that's going to require more conversation, more consideration. But I want you all to know that a day doesn't go by that we're not discussing this and we're not considering what needs to happen. This is one of those things where obviously there's a lot of media, there are a lot of opinions. I'm amazed by the number of experts that we're surrounded by. None of them with a medical degree, but appreciate some of their input. But I will say the concerns by our parents are greatly appreciated. I mean, it's real, it's a concern. And when we look at this, one of the issues obviously that we're putting out here that I want to use as an example is quarantine, right? We know, I mean, if we truly want to protect our children from COVID, then we don't let them have any interaction with any human beings, right? We don't send them to school. But I'm also going to say one of the things that this committee considers is just because that may be the safest in regard to COVID, that may not be what's in the best interest of our children. This is one of those situations where regardless of what decision or recommendation we make, there are going to be negative consequences. And the real difficulty with this is there's no way to know, right? We'll take the measures that we feel like are the best overall, considering all the parties involved, which will be the students, the staff, and even our patrons. And it's hard to know what is really going to be the best thing. The committee met, we discussed at length, and again, we'll still consider other things going forward. I feel like there's really 4 areas that are probably resulted in the most discussion. One was the question about cohorting in elementary schools. We know that we had concerns last year with the number of students in the classrooms so early in the day and our ability to monitor and supervise them, what that was doing in preparation for the day. And so that's one of the things in the recommendation that we're recommending, that we're not having any identified cohort plan, yet every building is individually looking at how they can cohort their classes that'll work for their building.
Can you
Right.
speak a little more about that, what you had?
Well, and I may turn some of this over to Ms. Calvin because she has been my brain,
Yeah, sure.
my brain source on the
Absolutely.
elementary side. I could give you an answer, but it wouldn't be very accurate.
No problem, and really, it's just kind of put that in layman's terms and talk about.
So, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So our students, and I'm going to give an example in first grade. We are self-contained, and let's say that there are 4 classrooms of first grade students. So we keep those students together in that classroom without mixing them with other classes as much as we can. One thing that we did last year, instead of holding students until a certain time to come in the building, which some schools would have them wait outside. If the weather is poor, they would wait inside together, maybe in the gym, where it would be a large group. Last year with the cohorting, as soon as the students arrived, they would go directly to their classroom. And then when we had specialty classes such as art, music, PE, the students would go in as a class instead of starbursting, where we would maybe take the students and divide them into 3 groups, not necessarily just with their class. So in some schools that, rotations for specialties. In some schools that had more than 3 individual classrooms, we would have to develop a 4th rotation. Sometimes that might be the media center, sometimes that was a school counselor that would come in for classroom counseling during that time. We also ate lunch in the classrooms, and so we didn't have the students all going to the cafeteria for lunch. We kept students in smaller groups on the playground so that they weren't mixing with each other. So the cohort for elementary was keeping the students with a smaller group, their classroom, as much as we possibly could.
And in the new plan, the current plan?
The new plan, now we have some school sites, and Mrs. Kiger has been working with the principals. We have some school sites that are able to cohort a little bit better than others, as far as, you know, if they have 3 sections per grade level, they keep them together when they go to specialties. We know that some schools for lunchtime, they really prefer to have lunch in the cafeteria, and so the classes are sitting at tables by class and spreading them out as much as they can. Recess time is a grade level that goes outside. Some schools are able to divide up the classes and section out the playground. Some are not as much as others can. But we were intending on waiting until, you know, the school starts at 7:40 for elementary. Teachers are required to be at school by 7:15. We were going to wait until 7:25 for all students to go to the classroom this year.
And along those same lines, in terms of special events like assemblies, and I know we're still working specifically on Meet the Teacher. This hits home definitely differently this year since my son would be involved as well. Can you speak just at length a little bit about how the assemblies, some of the assemblies might be handled, or some of the special events?
Sure. So the plan was to go forth with having our assemblies. Some schools divide by grade levels for assemblies. They might have primary, so maybe kindergarten through 2nd grade would have an assembly together, and then grades 3 through 5. But certainly, depending on the size of the school, the size of the gym, some schools could potentially have an assembly for a whole school assembly. I know that we did not write in any special guidelines for assemblies other than we were going to allow for assemblies this year.
Is it possible to revisit that still with the understanding that we want to social distance as much as possible?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's all possible. It's all on the line. It really is. And so even as, and I know that Mr. Bushyhead has stated this, and Dr. Hartzler has too, the plan that we have in place today might not be the plan that we recommend on Friday.
Thank you.
Well, and there are certain items in here, such as the Meet the Teacher. I know I was visiting with 6th, 7th grade staff today about, you know, they have kickoff assembly at the first of the year. Those items are still being considered. And those are decisions, certainly as the administration in the building would make the decision to have it, they could make the decision to not have it. We're trying to support them with as much information as we can. Again, reading as much data as we can. Dr. Hartzler, as you know, is in contact with Dr. Dart, getting information from him, trying to stay up on that. It's difficult, as you guys know, because there is conflicting information out there regarding some of the data that is being publicized. But when we look at this and we consider some of these things, it does become discussions about necessities. I mean, we know we've got athletics and spirit groups right now that are meeting every day, and they're working together every day, and it's impossible to cohort them as much as maybe we would hope. So there's going to be that exposure that's going to exist. You know, it's tough because you can't, again, for lack of better words, you can't quantify what this is going to be, right? Because I've got a first grader and they get quarantined for 10 days, and then 3 weeks later they get quarantined for 10 days, and then 3 weeks later they get quarantined for 10 days. We know that that's a negative consequence. I mean, at a time when, I mean, as a district, one of our focus, strategies is on reading acquisition and the ability of our kids to learn how to read. Well, if they're not in school, that's very difficult for them to do. And so even though we know that exposure, the safest thing in some circumstances might be to send them home and quarantine them, it's hard to know whether or not that's a greater risk than what they're dealing with by not being in school, right? Because we also don't know what their exposure is after we send them home. So those are difficult discussions that we've had. We've spent a lot of time on it, and we will continue to, I am certain, spend part of each of our days discussing this. I think, the cohorts, the quarantine issues are probably the biggest that we've heard from folks, that they would like us to take a stronger stance, or some of them have shared that. Some of the wording, I know that folks have expressed that they would like us to say expected instead of recommended or highly recommended. I think the semantics of that sounds great. The reality is we are in a position right now where people have a personal choice to make. They have a choice to get vaccinated if they're over the age of 12, and they have a choice to wear a mask if they would like. And, we're going to support that. There's been concerns about, well, would kids be harassed if they wore a mask? Well, I hope not, and if those situations occur, we will respond to that, and we will deal with those situations. So I would ask that you approve the plan. I know there is one question here. There was some conflicting information, and Chris, you know this better than I do, on the quarantine language between the 24 and the 24 hours and the 10 days, so we will get that corrected. We have gone through multiple iterations of this document, and so I'll take blame for missing that one and not catching the conflict of information there.
Mr. Boucher, can you speak a little bit about just the process of getting the plan to this point? And the reason I'm asking about that, I know that the task force was well represented. I know in groups of any size, you will never get complete unity, but you can get consensus. You feel like you overall achieved consensus?
I felt like we did. I mean, I've always kind of guided the 70-100 rule. If we can get 70% agreement, we should get 100% support, because that's what the committee's established to do. It was a moving target. I mean, I just have to say, for me personally, I have gone back and forth on so many of these things, trying to figure out what is in the best interest of the kids, what can we do, weighing the safety side of it with the academic side of it. And we never want to put our kids in a situation where their lives would be in danger, or their health would be in danger. But I also think there are other consequences that have to be considered in these circumstances, and it's just hard to measure that. So I felt like we did, but again, we met 12 days ago, so not knowing fully what has shifted in the minds of some of the committee members, other than the conversations that we've had here, just again, on a daily basis, discussing how we're going to implement this at the school site. We talked about, and we've discussed this in previous meetings, about setting some criteria that would be our trigger. But if you'll remember, we closed down during last year for reasons that would not have been in the criteria. Right? We were either short on subs or teachers, or we had situations that we shut down bus service for different levels at different points, and so all of those things is, I feel that our administrative team and coordination, I feel like we have a great relationship with UCTA and with USPA, and get their input on it and find out how they feel on it. Trying to make the best decision we can for our district. I mean, we really want to have school. I mean, you guys know, a year ago, we brought a plan to the board, And, you know, the board voted against and made a change to the plan, and in hindsight, I think the board was absolutely right on it. You know, and I look at it and we're, as a committee, have made our best decision on this, and our best recommendation, knowing that 48 hours from now, we could possibly, you know, be saying, Dr. Hartzler, we need an emergency board meeting because we've got some issues, and
Yeah,
that's
so
where.
let me ask
Yeah.
about that. We would like to avoid that, though it certainly would do so if you need us. But Dr. Hartzler, do you feel like you have the protocol authority granted to you already to make changes on the fly if needed?
I think that's a tough question, Mr. Kinnear, to kind of answer right off the top of my head. I think there are measures that we are obviously going to monitor right from the start to determine if indeed we need to make some modifications. One being that COVID. I mean, and I've said this to Mr. Bushihead and the committee members, our data are going to drive what we do right out of the gate here. It's just, I believe we've got to put forth a plan that's going to provide us with some direction and some guidance in terms of what we expect from the first day of school on. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens with our numbers each and every day. I don't think we're going to have probably much in the first day or two, but obviously after a few days, we're going to have a baseline established, and then from there, we will monitor, and we're going to also adjust accordingly. I can tell you I am in constant conversation with Dr. Bruce Starr. As a matter of fact, I was on the phone with him again today. We talk a lot. He's doing a phenomenal job. He is well aware of our plan, and this we have to come to accept. There's no perfect plan here. As much as we would like to be able to carve out a plan that is just perfect, it's not possible. So that's the difficulty in what Mr. Bushihead was referencing, is that on the one hand, we could take a very, very strict approach to our protocols, our procedures, and our measures, and then we're going to be dealing, I can assure you, with a faction of our community and parents who would not be in favor of some of these more stringent measures that we could put in place, or I could recommend, or we could recommend to you as a board. So we just got to remember that this document that we're asking you to approve is not a fixed document. It is not set in stone. There is a reason why we explicitly put in here that it is a fluid document, because certainly we don't know enough about this variant over the next 2 days, 2 weeks, a month. I think if there's anything good about this is, Dr. McNeil, I've heard from Dr. Dark, this is a pretty fast-moving variant, but at the same time, it's something that we've got to be mindful of. So again, I'm open to saying that certainly if there are some things that we've got to do at the building level, such as for me to say no assemblies, then yeah, that's an easy thing for me to say, that we're not going to be doing them at this time. Meet the teacher, again, is still on the table, because I think it's problematic for us to be able to define for you everything that we do and ask for your approval on all those things. I mean, that's just going to stymie our ability to kind of do what these folks are, paid to do, and they're phenomenal at it. We'll continue to work closely with our unions and our support and certified staff, and also our site administrations. And again, we will adjust accordingly based on our data. I really, truly, I am going to be very interested to see what this no mask mandate is going to look like for our state and in our schools. I will say that I'm not a fan of what has passed the legislature in terms of Senate Bill 658. I think it's certainly recognizing what our health experts and what our science has said about this virus. So that's a long way of answering your question, Mr. Kinnear, to say, absolutely, I believe I have some authority to make some of these adjustments, but some of the other things, obviously, in terms of the mask, I mean, that's a big one. I can't do that. In terms of quarantining, that is something that is a little, certainly, I think, a more stringent measure. And I think truly I would need to probably call the board back in an emergency meeting to say, I have a recommendation I would like to make. But again, our data is going to tell us. I think the data will tell us pretty quickly if indeed our plan is for, I mean, there's probably a better word, that's not as restrictive maybe, or not as stringent as it should be. And then again, we'll adjust accordingly.
Thank you for indulging my questions. I do want to make sure all of our board members have opportunities to ask and get answers to every question that you all have. So I'm going to open it up individually to each of you all now.
Yeah, definitely. Along these same lines, when I think of Union, I think of our mission statement for kids to be 100% career and college ready. That speaks conviction. It speaks direction. And whatever data that we find along the way definitely allows us to move and pivot and be flexible. But at that same time, that message is pervasive amongst all of us. We know exactly what we come to do on a daily basis. And I think this plan should follow the same suit. It should be a solid foundation. So even if there's things that we not necessarily know what's going on right now, we are able to speak that to our patrons and our family and the kids that know that we're thinking about the school routes. We're thinking about every seat on that bus. We're thinking about what's going on the playground, because right now, just with the standard that it represents, I think there's things that are left unsaid that we can definitely do a better job of directing. And regardless of if it changes tomorrow, what does that do in terms of speaking confidence about what's going on tomorrow, what our families are going to feel? So I think that's definitely a step that we should take in looking at this, and how that shapes our next steps is going to be so important. The bottom line for us, you had mentioned earlier that the safest place is at home, but at the same time, our mission as educators is to be able to empower these kids. We don't want to see them in the emergency room, and we are that wall. We're the only thing that's really stopping them from knowing, hey, data is our friend. We're going to utilize that to keep you safe and keep you fed and keep you educated. But the school has to have that strong front in order to provide that. And so I think that as we move forward with that plan, this is something that we can definitely lay out and not only see it as an operating guide, but also as empowerment for what our families need to know. It's not necessarily a question. I just think it definitely needs to.
Thank you. I don't know if I can answer that. Well, I want to make one comment on this. That's one thing. I mean, I hate for you all, because some of the communication has implied that we don't care. There's not anybody on this board, there's not anybody on the committee that doesn't care about our students and our staff, and that's really the discussions. I mean, we have a lot of conditions out there that just aren't necessarily a good setting for us sending kids home. And I'm not talking about family, I'm talking about people who have to go to work every day that might not have the ability to supervise their kids at home. I'm talking about the availability of food. I'm talking about all those things. Those discussions are happening. So that's one of the main points I want folks to know. There's a lot of thought, and there's just a lot of consideration and concern about what is in the best interest of our kids. I'm also going to say that I think we have a virtual option that is viable and it's effective. And we have some situations where we are basically putting it in the parent's hand to make a choice. And, that's hard, and it would be a lot easier if all these choices were forced on us. But some of this is a situation where the parents are going to have to make a choice. This is what option we have, and this is the other. Because as Dr. Hartzler said, we change things, and you're going to hear the complaints from the other side. So we know that regardless of what decision we make, there are gonna be people that are gonna disagree with it. And as I said earlier, we also know regardless of what decision we make, there are going to be consequences. And none of them necessarily all positive for our kids. So I appreciate that, because I think that's the most important message I want people to understand is there are a lot of caring people, and the parents. I do appreciate their input, because it's helpful for them to ask us these questions and cause us to reconsider. So,
With that being said, is there a way to fill in some of the gaps that this current plan leaves? I mean, just with today, and you already mentioned this with, and the health monitoring of the student in that second sentence, just not being factual. Obviously that has to be something that changes, but also there's other things that parents have brought up that they want to know, like, what is our stance on this? What is, even if it changes, just having a baseline operation, because that's something that we're able to do to fortify this a little bit.
You'd have to clarify for me what you're looking for.
Definitely.
Because we can certainly add things. I mean, I'll just give you a great example. The Oklahoma State Department of Health recommends that we send every kid home that's got a cough. We live in the state of Oklahoma. We have a large number of students that have allergies that cough all the time. If we send every kid home based upon that recommendation, we won't have kids in school, right? And so their flow chart of indicators of what you need to do, and it was on the column that any one of these symptoms, and then on the other side it was any three of these symptoms. Well, the one cough was on the side that said they have that one symptom, they're going home. So when we put that in the plan and we follow that, then we are directing our folks that if I'm a classroom teacher, I'm looking at you, Dina, and a kid coughs in her class, he's going to the nurse, and the nurse is sending him home. That's kind of, again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm reluctant to jump too far on that, but that's one of the problems with putting too much on those specifics, because by nature, I'll just say this, educators tend to be rule followers. That's how we got through school, right?
Yeah.
And so when we say, you're gonna send them home, they're gonna send them home. And I'm concerned that the numbers would be so great with that. And we're fortunate compared to a lot of other districts that we have a nursing staff that is very professional and very trained. And so I feel better about them being involved in that decision rather than me saying that this kid has to go home for this item. It'd be easier for them if we did, but I'm a little concerned about going down my own committee things. Like the quarantine, I do think that's a question. That's one that I personally have a stronger feeling about it today than I did 12 days ago, right? Because I'm watching it too, and I have concerns. Dr. Hartzler, I'm going to be curious to see what happens. Because we're now starting to see large groups of kids coming together and being together. So.
Yeah, just along those lines, those two things, when we look at subjective and objective data, like we can take a temperature and have like, okay, this is concrete. Because once again, it's more so for the parents to know, if your kid is leaving the house with these symptoms, probably a good time to stay home. But in this, it says, stay home, and if it's gone in 24 hours, then they're good to go back to school, which is false. And so being able to fill those gaps with not only stay home for 10 days with 3 days of no fever, which is the CDC guideline, and it's what we're recommending in the ER and through the pediatric groups. Like that level of security for the parent to know that this is my operating guide. And that's where I think that we have to come in with the data and supply that to the families. Now that's one example. Based on all the emails I've gotten in the past 24 hours, I can go on a lot more, but I know just with some of the examples that Chief said, I think we're all definitely on the same page. I just want it to be known that like, this isn't something I can vote on until it's fixed.
Hey, I want to add to that too. What you were saying, I mean, you are correct. We care about the kids, the students, the teachers, and everything. So if there's certain things that we cannot do, then I think the question then is, then what can we do? If we're talking about the data. or the rates, or, you know, it's a fast moving variant, right? If that's what it is, then what is it that we can do, what can we do right now to withstand that as it's moving, you know, quickly? You know, what is it can we do? So does that mean, you know, do we open up to meet the teacher? Do we open up to assemblies? Do we do all that? Or do we really think about, okay, if these are the concerns, then can we start shifting that? And as much as I know we don't want to, you know, I tend to think worst case scenario sometimes, or most of the time. So I have to think, you know, I know through all this process, I've thought about, you know, even my daughter in all of this. You know, she's 8. You know, just, you know, her early years of life and what she struggled with. And so me as a parent, you know, in everyday life, I have to do what is best for her to protect her, right? Whether she knows it or not. So I remember even last year through all of this thinking, man, I know how much I care for my daughter and my kids and what's going on. Do these teachers care about these kids? You know, which I thought about that. Well, clearly the answer is yes. I spent time at the schools. I watched how they took care of them, what they did. They treat them as their own, and that's great. But that being said, you know, like what Chris is saying, is there more that we can do? You know, as we go through this, because there are. I mean, you're right. And you know, that committee we met, so much has changed since then. It's still shifting quickly. So as that's happening, what can we do to shift with it or shift even ahead of it? So we're not having to catch up with this data or make these meetings, you know, as it was mentioned earlier. It'd be nice to not have to do that and try to be ahead of it now.
Well, I think the example you just brought up, though, is the quarantine. Right, I mean, that really is, because if we say that child goes home, we're gonna send a kid home if she's not feeling well, which would happen even without COVID, right? They're sick, they go home. At what point do they get to come back? If we're sending them home because of COVID-related symptoms, and we say they're going to be home for the 10 days for the quarantine, and we make that decision, then that's the decision for everyone, right? That's the decision for every student that we feel like has those symptoms, right? There would be exceptions, and I think our nurses have had some exceptions where they like, I know this kid, I know their medical history, I know where they're at, this is not what they're dealing with. But that's really the question on that one, right? Because does the parent then at that time have the choice to send their child back to school? Their kids maybe not shown any other symptoms down the road, they're within a day, they're feeling better. Does the parent have the option to send them back to school? If we say we're going to quarantine, or we're going to follow the quarantine guidelines, that is no longer an option for them. And that was a big discussion. I mean, it's again, it's a very difficult decision. Can we do that? Certainly. We can put that very firm in the plan. And I think if that's something we wanted to do tonight, I think that's something where there may be a separate vote as far as adding that to the plan. At the conclusion of our meeting on the 12th, I felt like we had a majority of our members that did not feel like quarantine was in the best interest of our children. Right? And it's hard because I know we can say, gosh, you're putting their physical health in jeopardy, and that's a lot of pressure, but we also have to look at what are the other consequences. Because the parent still has the option, within the plan, the parent has the option to quarantine that child, right? So they still, if we don't require it, they can still do it. It still falls under the COVID absences, it still fits in that situation. So that's why I said I think it's one of the big 4 discussions. The other 2 really aren't big discussions, even though it comes up about the mask, right? Because we really don't have any options on that, in my opinion, in reading the law.
I think the only option we have left when it comes to that is really gonna be the verbiage, and what we decide to put on that verbiage. As far as like the entry, the doors, you know, what we do, because, I mean, you are correct. You wear or you not wear it. but I think if we do our part to say, hey, you know, like he was saying, we are concerned, we do show at least, hey, we're trying, that at least is better than, you know, the other side of it.
No. At the same time, it's like, my main point is we're creating a culture. And at the end of the day, it's like, if everyone took the vaccine, like, a lot of this stuff could be avoided. And so how do we create that conversation? How do we open that dialogue? Well, it's by having a consistent plan that we all agree with, that the safety is a top priority. So if we just took this document and imagine if we added pictures from 3 different sites with the desks or the lunch tables being 3 feet apart, showing that this is the level of commitment. Now we know we can do it. We know that it's done, but people don't know. People don't know what we do. They know you just put on the cape and then kids start graduating. But like that, at some point, it has to be explicitly stated to build that culture, We're trying to get kids to come back to Union. We're trying to get kids to stay in Union. We're trying to get kids to be safe. Like, to embody that culture, these are the steps that we have to take. And one of those is just, this is the plan, this is the mission, this is the vision, this is how we're gonna keep you safe. So a part of this is, yeah, I know it's a science of very, very, very structured and stringent guidelines. At the end of the day, it is an art too. We know that, my kid felt fine at 9 days and I want to send them back. Okay, let's have that conversation. That's what this place is all about, is being the exception for these kids. But to open up that dialogue, we have to have a foundation. And so I think going back to this is, how can we make this more robust so families feel confident in what we're doing? Because we know you're doing it, but they don't.
Let's circle back on that one and come back to that. Ms. McAdams, I want to make sure we get all of your questions addressed.
Well, I mean, I will start with, I think my big concerns are, pretty much what you mentioned, with whether or not we quarantine, what that looks like, do we cohort or not, do we allow visitors in the building, do we allow assemblies? I mean, I feel like those are the big pieces of the plan that we've sort of left open-ended. I was on the committee, and I know 12 days ago that felt like the right choice at the time for the preponderance of the committee, that where we were in our world with COVID and the knowledge and the data we had just 12 days ago, being able to leave that open-ended and leave that as a parent's choice. You have a choice. Send your kid to in-person, send your kid to virtual, send your kid with a mask, don't send your kid with a mask. If you're old enough, get a vaccine, don't get a vaccine. Putting that choice back on the parents was the agreement of the committee 12 days ago, and it felt like that was reasonable. It's only been 12 days, and it already doesn't feel reasonable. A lot's just changed in these last 2 weeks that there's no way the committee could have predicted it was gonna happen. I mean, there's another variant out as of like yesterday, I think. So, and now the CDC and the health department are recommending you wear masks inside again if you're, in a group. That was not true 12 days ago. Those were not things we had to even consider. But it's 12 days later. And I feel like, I agree, we have to consider them now. We have to look at, is quarantine the reasonable option? I was in that discussion. I realized all the, it's definitely, it feels like we're right back where we were last year, like just what you said. Whatever decision we make is gonna be a bad decision. There's not a way to both keep kids safe at home and keep kids safe in school. You can't have both. We have to choose one. My son was sick for all of last year, unrelated to COVID, and I know his experience essentially being the kid who got taught, this quarantine kid all year, since he was technically in person, in the hopes that he would actually be able to attend school. But his experience was that he got, the work sent home to him, and he got to teach himself, and he got no direct instruction unless it was the 2 weeks the whole district went to distance learning. We know that's not an ideal way for a kid to learn. And your example earlier, you get sent home to quarantine for 10 days, you're back for 3 weeks, and you get sent home again for 10 days. I wish I had the magic bullet answer for how we handle that, but I feel like 0 quarantine is not the answer. And I hate it that we're in this same place this year that we were last year, where there's not a clear cut, here's the best thing to do for kids. Because we can't choose that. There's not one. There's a lot of things we're not allowed to do legally. I mean, we can't ask people to show us they've been vaccinated or to prove it. I guess we can ask, we can't require it. We can't require anybody to get vaccinated. We can promote it, we can strongly recommend it, but we can't put any sort of requirement on it. We can't require masks. So back to like what Joey said, what can we do? What are the things in our control? Allowing visitors into the building or not, that's an easy within our control. Allowing assemblies or not, that's an easy within our control. You know, we look at what we did last year, and yes, we were able to have masks, but we had all these other pieces in place as well, and that's how we stayed in school. So given what's happening with Delta, just even over the last 12 days, how can we completely remove what we put in place last year and say that we're taking it as seriously as we did last year?
I'll comment on that just for discussion amongst ourselves here. I think the difference is there is a vaccination this year that wasn't available last year. So we've had all of those protections in place, taking choices away because there was no vaccination. There is a vaccination for 12 and over. I fully acknowledge there's not for under 12, but at least from a parent's perspective, from a 12-year-old and older, that is a major difference than what we had last year.
I agree, and I don't know if that means maybe a piece of that quarantine looks like, if you show us you've been vaccinated, then here's quarantine protocol B for those who've been vaccinated. Maybe that's what that looks like, I don't know.
We can't request that by.
No, I know we can't request it, but we can put out there, if you choose to show us your card, show us you've been vaccinated, then there is a different protocol. We don't require it, but we could have a separate protocol, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's not legal either.
I like where you're going with that. I would want legal to
Yeah,
weigh in before
I know.
we did, but I
Yeah.
very much understand and appreciate that dialogue.
Because I know that was a big piece of the quarantine discussion in committee, was there is a whole other level of quarantine protocol now that there is a vaccine for those over 12. The other piece of it is when the kids turn 12. If you say, okay, we have this protocol to protect our kids who aren't yet 12, well, sure, most of them are gonna turn 12 in 6th or 7th grade, but some are gonna turn 12 in 5th grade, some are gonna maybe even turn 12 in 8th grade. So where do you draw that line was a whole nother discussion as part of committee. If you're trying to delineate between those who can and can't get a vaccine, and I know that, and again,
Well, at one point, we had quarantining for pre-K through 7 in the discussion, and splitting those up based upon the age group. And again, part of the discussion came down to, we had kids that were out of school multiple times last year. And if a student is out 40 days, that's the equivalent of 2 months of instruction. And that's the hard thing. I mean, that's the hard thing.
It seems like there's a distinction, I'm gonna offer this, and reserve the right to be corrected. It seems like there's a distinction to be made among quarantining a positive COVID case versus a quarantine somebody who may or may not have been exposed to that.
So in the plan, I mean, when a student or a staff member has a positive case and we're aware of it, they are isolated. So it's a different It's a different process, but they're isolated regardless if they are in a positive case, so.
So, so we got that in there already?
Yes.
And so, does this plan say that we will at least inform, your?
Our plan is to do close contact, which means we would, as soon as possible, contact anybody that we felt like was within 6 feet for 15 minutes of the infected person, of the positive person. So,
And so, Dr. McNeil, ask you from your perspective, does that fall short or meet the objective of the quarantines that would be expected?
As far as like the specific numbers, like I feel like it meets it, but once again, I just feel like it's kind of a losing battle. Like, you know, we want people to be safe. You know, we're definitely going into this year knowing that people are going to get infected, but at what point in time are we addressing the fact of like, that's a minority. That's not the mass. The mass group, you know, we're still gung-ho on what the mission is at hand. For that small group, we can move in ways to, hey, you know, you've missed school now for a whole month because you keep getting infected again. Like, we can specialize in that area, and we always do. That's what we're really good at, is being the exception for that kid, that 1% that didn't walk across that stage. We can do that, but once again, it's like you know, at length we spent so much time on that when we've missed the other 900, and it's like, what is their plan? Where's their guidance? And so, I definitely think there's a plan already in place. The CDC has laid that out. It's really simple and easy to read. If they don't get it from us, they'll go to the ER, they'll get it there, they'll go to their pediatrician. But at the end of the day, like, what is our operating standard for everyone else? And when a kid gets infected, we have that protocol. We used it last year, we use it this year. If it changes, we'll use that. But what is our operating standard that gives parents confidence of what we're doing on day one? And I don't think it's here yet.
Can I ask, and this is group discussion here, what would it take to get it there? What language or specific wording would get you there?
Definitely. So, like I said, first of all, just having correct terminology. The second sentence in the health monitoring of the student, giving teachers kind of the frame of mindset of what actually happens when they get infected. What's their plan? How does that work in with their days? I've heard it from them, but I don't get it from the documents. I really don't know where's their confidence come from. I know that there's the CARES Act versus this year versus different. Like, it's not clear, and because if it's not clear to me and it's not clear to them, it creates ambiguity, and ambiguity means we don't know what the mission is anymore. So that being something that we can address in a simple document, where is our policy on what we're going to do indoors? Yeah, we're going to recommend that things are, we do the social distancing, but like, where's the evidence in here? Yeah, we've done it last year, we support it. What are we doing as a union that's different from the rest? That we've always done, that makes us stand out. So I think there's a lot of things that we can utilize this to help us, as opposed to being something that drags us down. But if we spend too much time in one area, then it's things that we miss. All our answers are out there. All our answers are tuning in, and they'll tell us exactly what we want to hear in terms of how to make this document flowing so that they feel confident and what that creates for a culture. But I think that's what we definitely have to go back to. So we can go at length. I don't think that's necessary tonight. I think it's a matter of it needs to be improved. Let's sit down with the task force and do it.
well, I'm going to go to the health monitoring of your student. I'm trying to understand how that could be more clear, because it lists the symptoms that the student would experience, and they are to go home, and they are not to return to school until they are fever-free without medication for 24 hours.
Right. So let's say you have shortness of breath, cough, any of these, really any one of these.
Right.
If your parent notices it or a teacher notices it, that is, hey, you might have COVID. You may not. You might have RSV. We don't know. But the point is what it does to everyone else, what it does to the masses. You're now the Trojan horse. So we will have to isolate you in a way that protects the masses, and we can monitor you to see if your symptoms deteriorate. The only way we know that is what happens over the course of 10 days, not 24 hours, what it says here. That's where the hiccup is. So over that course of 10 days, you need 72 hours, you need 3 days to be able to figure out, are you ready to go back to school? And so that information here is implied, it's not stated. And so that's not clear direction on what the families need to do. 10 days if you have a symptom, you isolate. Over the course of that 10 days, during the last 3, getting up to from 7 all the way to 10, you have to have 0 symptoms. So you can be coughing, going on 7 days. Those 3 days you're not coughing anymore, now you're clear to go back to school. That's the CDC guideline. That's what we use in the emergency room. That's what the pediatricians are recommending. That's what will keep kids safe. And that is minority. And that's what I think should be in this document. Just if you take out the 24 hours, like, that's one less argument that I have.
Well, but again, I think that's the big decision. The 24 hours is the statement of non-quarantine. It is giving the parents the responsibility to monitor their child and make sure that their child's ready to come back to school regular.
But it's not evidence-based. There's no evidence in 24 hours. You're gonna come back and you're gonna still be sick and you're gonna still be spreading
Question.
virus.
If this said students with a fever or other prominent COVID-19 symptoms without having COVID-19 should not be sent to school until they're fever-free for 24 hours, would that
No.
still?
If you have the symptoms, you have COVID until proven otherwise. So,
Which means we would quarantine.
yeah.
That's really the discussion, in my opinion. It's not that this is unclear, because this is pretty clear. It's whether or not this is adequate. If it's not adequate and the board feels we need to quarantine kids based upon symptoms that they present, then that's a discussion that you all, I hate to do this to you, but you all would need to make a recommendation for that change in the language, that we would follow quarantine procedures. If you go back to previous language in previous plans, we had a quarantine process, right, a protocol, and we followed that, and it was along CDC guidelines, so we did that.
Well, the difference here is what's right and what's wrong versus what's mandatory and what's not. Like, we can recommend 10 days because that is the right thing to do, but that doesn't mean a parent has to do it. And that's the difference in this document. The document says it's your option to do the right thing, but in here, it gives the option, but it does not give the correct information for the option. It's your option to come back in 24 hours. Sure, you can, but that's not correct, and it's optional. If it's your option to come back in 10 days, that's the correct information, and now it's optional, which begets a different argument. You know, do we want to make it mandatory? Do we not? That's one argument. Should it be 10 days? Should it be 24? 24 is not an argument. That should not be in any of our literature.
Are we, you said we're talking about this, we're talking about quarantine. Aren't we really in the new language talking about isolation? If we're sending home a kid with symptoms? I mean, I know I'm getting a little bit semantical there, but we have specifically made a point about making a difference between quarantine being a close contact, the result of a close contact versus isolating, meaning you have symptoms.
And if I understand right, Dr. McGill, you're talking about anyone that actually has COVID symptoms. The language that you're concerned about is for somebody right now who is showing those signs.
Right. If your foot hurts, sure, take a day off and come back tomorrow. But if you have any of these symptoms which are known to be associated with COVID, and we want to do the right thing and not spread it, and kids can't be vaccinated, the right thing to do is isolate or quarantine for 10 days. They can be interchangeable.
So rather than, because the CDC standards change, rather than saying for 24 hours, to be change that should not be sent to school until they are fever-free without medication. See CDC guidelines for current, for length of time.
You can, but once again, the option we're getting to, is it an option or is it our stance?
Yeah. And
If you try to hey, get on the bus, what are we gonna do? That's what it gets down to.
And I think the other wording with that too is, yeah, it says CCDC, we were looking at it today, yesterday, I mean, because it's shifting and they have made changes, and that's the other thing, you know, if we're gonna agree on that. At what point did we agree on that, though, because it, you know, because it is shifting, it has changed, and like I said, you know, 12 days ago, we thought we were good, you know, and here we are now, having the discussion.
And we don't have to write it tonight. I think it's important, we have a plan, it just needs to be bolstered.
I do think it's important to get language tonight that the four of us, or a quorum of us, can agree on. And Dr. Lindy, you know, you expressed concerns that you couldn't vote for this language. And I want to be respectful of that, but also acknowledge that this process will change, the language will change, and I'm asking if you did, is this something you could not approve as it stands, period, or could we modify it a bit, or could we accept it and with the idea that it is going to need to be changed?
We can modify or accept with the idea that it needs to be changed. Because otherwise, right now, as it reads, it's incorrect.
Okay. Can you give me something that doesn't extend out to 10 days necessarily, but gives you comfort level that you could be, that you could say, it's not
No.
24 hours. Okay, so,
No.
So you believe strongly it needs to say, if you've got COVID, you're out for 10 days.
I believe it because that's what the literature says.
Yeah, okay.
That's what
But
we're.
that's quarantining,
Yeah.
which is language
So we've got
we've
that.
had it before.
Isolation.
No, if you've got COVID, you're isolated.
Right, and that's what
But
we're
if you
talking
have the
about.
symptoms, you're quarantined.
I think that's
No.
where things, like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you have the symptoms, you have COVID until proven otherwise. It's a waste of a test to even stick a swab up your nose and make you more miserable when you can't breathe. Like, you have COVID. The question is, are you going to the hospital or are you staying home? Whether you isolate, quarantine, meditate by yourself in a room, the word doesn't matter. You need to be isolated away from everyone else. Because the point is, do we want to see it in one kid or do we want to see it in several hundred? And that's how we fix it, is we follow the literature of what's available.
So, Mr. Bushyhead, maybe a fix of this is to say, if you've got, there is a presumption, if you've got these COVID symptoms, and refer them to the isolation guidelines. I'm asking them to propose it.
I think maybe I think, correct me if I'm wrong, are you wanting this health monitoring of your student section to reflect, here's what happens when we have a kid who we think is sick with COVID symptoms? And right now, it does not. It reflects our general, we send a sick kid home policy.
Right, yeah, exactly. This is pre-2019 language. And so you can't quote the CDC if you're not saying what the CDC says.
So, okay, how about should not be sent to school until they are well?
Oh, you can't do that either because that's just, well, once again, you know, we're an education body. We are a public government entity. Whatever we do should be sounded in science. It should make sense. It should be a clear-cut procedure of what we're doing and move forward. That's our mission. You know, it's not 88% career and college ready, it's 100%. So why would we deviate on anything else? The mission is to keep kids safe and empower them. If we falter and it says it right plain as day in our language, like, what does that say to our parents? What does that say to the families? The question that I go back to time and time again is, what values are we promoting? Is it something that's mandatory or is it something that's optional? Either way, we have to give them the correct information. But moving forward, that's the decision that needs to be made. What is our stance? Are we gonna say, you cannot get on the bus because you've been you've had these symptoms and it's not 10 days yet? Or are we gonna say, okay, well, if you're willing to take that risk and you're not gonna wear a mask because we can't mandate that either, but you know, you just play nice and try to hold your breath on popping everybody else, then that's something that we're willing to do for the next 365 days. That's the stance that we have to make. And there is no tiptoeing around it. That's the state that we're in. But when we do it, if we do it with conviction, you change the culture of the whole district. So now we can open a conversation about vaccines. Is it safe for you? Is it not? It's not for everybody. That's okay. But are we even having a conversation about the hesitancy? Do they even have someone that they can go and talk to about it, that it is an option? Do they have access to masks? No, we can't even get to that point because we're still stuck on here making sure that the language is right. So that, we can't, at the end of the day, we can't quote the CDC if we're not gonna say what the CDC says.
And I think we make reference to the website, not necessarily quoting the CDC.
Either way. Either way.
We're providing information.
Yeah,
Because
but that
we're not
information still has to
again,
be
we're not
correct.
following every guideline that they're providing.
Why not?
If we were, but for a couple reasons, it'd be against the law for us to do that. Because Senate Bill 658 says we can't, right? So we know we can't do that, and we know that's probably the best mitigation strategy. So I do think, and again, we have the wording in past documents about quarantine, and I don't want to get into the semantics, but I think what you just said is exactly what has to happen. This board is in a position where they're going to have to make a stand as to whether we're going to require quarantine in our district, which means if you have these symptoms, you are assumed to be COVID positive until time is up, right? And you've met those guidelines. That's the quarantine procedure. We have those, we've written them before. The language in the document right now is not mandatory quarantine. It is written, so a parent is going to watch their child and make a decision whether or not they should stay at home, which is typical to like everything else that we've done in the past. And so I think that really is, I mean, I hate to say it, I mean, I wish it was easy, but I think that really is the decision. Is the board wanting to make the recommendation that we require quarantine protocol when a student exhibits these symptoms? If that's the case, you do use CDC, you do follow those guidelines, and you do their thresholds. But again, that's a decision. When we met as a committee, that was not our recommendation. Our recommendation was not that we were going to follow protocol.
I would like to respectfully disagree from my perspective.
From the whole committee?
Well, my understanding, and you were there too, if you want to chime in, but my understanding of that conversation was, I get it, we're talking that we can interchange isolation and quarantine, but in committee, we were not. Quarantine referred to you were contact tracing, that you had close contact.
Right.
And do we send you home for quarantine or not, regardless of if you have symptoms? Is it just you were in close contact, you get sent home? That was quarantine. Isolation was, you have symptoms, you must go home and follow COVID protocols until you can return to school. That was my understanding in committee, and that's why we had a discussion about isolation versus quarantine and split them out as separate terms. So,
Well, I've never read in the CDC isolation ever used in regard to anything other than positive COVID test. Right, so I mean, that's, when I read that, that's the word, that's what it's associated with. Isolation is associated with a positive COVID test, right? So, but I think you make a good point on contact tracing. So what if I'm contact traced and I have no symptoms? Do I quarantine that student? You know, again.
It's different. It's different if you have a vaccine or not. And once again, that's in the CDC website.
But we can't require proof of that.
No. If someone pops a positive test and you are calling mom and saying, hey, your kid has been in the classroom, we've got the phone call all last year, that they have been exposed to COVID. If mom says, hey, my son has been vaccinated, 5 days out. Hey, I'm not vaccinated. 5 days unless you have symptoms. Then it's 10 days. Like, that's it. The question is, are we going to mandate that, or is it optional?
I think that's the operative word here, is that are we going to be passive in our approach? Or are we going to more be authoritative? The idea behind a lot of this, as you all know, is the fact that we're trying to give our parents choice in terms of the health and the safety and well-being of their child. And I think it's a very tough decision for the board to contemplate and then to decide on. But there is the difference. Last year, we did not give them a choice in the matter. We were more authoritative to say, you have been exposed to a student that is positive, so therefore you are quarantined for 10 and then 7, I think is what they changed throughout the school year. So I think that's the salient point here that we're stuck on here, is trying to determine that as a board, do you all want to make the recommendation that this becomes more authoritative as opposed to passive or more of a parent's choice? And of course, the thinking of the committee was that, look, we're going to allow our parents to make that choice in terms of if they want to send their kids to school or not. And I wish it was clear. I wish there was a brighter line here in this, but you know, there's not. And this is going to be one of these really tough issues for us to grapple with and to decide. So to me, that is the clear distinction between what we're talking about, is either as a district, we're going to take much more of an active approach, or passive. In terms of passive, meaning we're going to give parents choice.
I do want to say this. They do have a choice. You have a choice to get a vaccine. You have a choice to wear masks. You have a choice to do virtual. And these are all things that the district has provided. And I think if we offer that in this document, and that's how it's clearly stated, we come in as partners to the kids' education rather than, man, it's on you. Like, hey, Sid did this to us, the rest is on you. Like, you gotta figure it out. That's not fair to our parents. That's not fair to our families. And so the language of the document, I think, should very much reflect, hey, these are the things, this is how we've worked to make this available. You can wear a mask and we'll even embroider it for you. You can put this, you can get a vaccine. You can, and we'll find a way for you to find a clinic that's close to you. You can do virtual. And we've gone through great lengths in many board meetings to make sure that virtual program is top notch. But that's not how this is expressed. And I think if we express it like that, you know, it doesn't become, are we being authoritative, are we being passive? We're being a partner in our family's education.
Well, I agree. I think perhaps even in your letter, Dr. Harsher, you can line out, I'd offer for consideration, you could even line out those choices that are available, vaccination, mask, and virtual. That at least sets the groundwork for what the plan is. I do think we need to grapple with this notion of isolation versus quarantine. I will tell you, I don't like to find myself in a position of disagreeing on a medical issue with a doctor, so I say this cautiously and not authoritatively. My accounting background, parent background tells me very much agree with the notion that isolation is a requirement with a positive test. I'm a little bit concerned. I know in an ER it's appropriate to make that jump to you've got COVID. I'm a little fearful, I guess, of us automatically making that jump without a positive test. So I would like, if we were to go the isolation route, which I think we should, I think it should be with a positive test. I'm reluctant at all to force a quarantine measure on an exposure. I feel strongly that we need to contact and let people know that there's a distinct possibility that they've been exposed. But I probably am hesitant, reluctant to say, because you might have been exposed, we're going to put you under quarantine protocol. So those are just some of my thoughts. Don't know if you can agree with those, disagree strongly.
No, I agree. I think as we look into this and we think about what's coming down the pipeline, we can't decide to quarantine halfway through the year when RSV's in full swing, the flu comes back, and masks are optional. So things will get worse before they get better, because the usual suspects that normally cause our kids to get out of school are now back in full swing with masks being optional. And the vaccines aren't really built to handle some of those issues. So kind of just going into it, I want you just to consider the thought. As we get deeper down the line, if things happen and get worse, are we in a position to enforce? Are we in a position to once again use the data to make moves, be safe, and keep our kids safe? But what is going to be our distraction come December and February?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with data, we will be able to have the flexibility to move to more stringent measures if those are warranted. There's nothing here in my thought process that says, nope, this is it, and regardless how bad it is, this is what it is. I think data would tell us if we need to take more stringent measures.
So if I could add some context to that, because I think Dr. Muir is making a good point here, and I'm going to be careful in what I say about this in my conversation with Dr. Dart. When we think about data, right, because I highly respect his views and how he's leading our county through this pandemic. Very much highly respect him as an individual and what he is doing as a leader. When we think about data, we have to think about the data that we see within our own community, right, and within the zip codes that make up Union Public Schools. And then there's another set of data that makes up what we're seeing within our organization. And to Mr. Kinnear's point is, that is what, and I've had this conversation with Dr. Dart to say, when we look at data, it's just not one side, right? We're looking at certainly what's happening within our county, our zip codes within Union, and we're also looking at what's happening in our own schools. So to answer your question, absolutely, there's no way that I'm going to sit back and if I watch our data within Union Public Schools start to spike and the numbers increase dramatically, there is no question that my COVID team is going to be sitting down at 4 o'clock when we get those data into my office and say, okay, we've got to now talk about what measures do we need to incorporate, or what is it within this plan that we need to go back to the board on to say, to change. I will not hesitate in doing that, because it would be irresponsible for me to not do that. Just like last year, when we made the decisions of creating our plan, we adjusted accordingly. And there was a time, if you recall, that I had to shut down school. I mean, we missed 10 days at the secondary level and 5 days at the elementary level, but it wasn't always just based on our COVID numbers. It was based on our inability to operate efficiently, whether it be in transportation or to staff in a manner that would be safe for our students and our schools. So I only offer this up. Certainly there are some verbiage in here that we can go back and we are open to any suggestions or recommendations that the board might have here. But we have to think of this plan as being nimble, based not only on the zip codes that make up our 28 square miles, but also our own data in terms of what we're seeing at the school sites.
I'm gonna agree with Chris that I think this health monitoring section needs to be made clear regarding isolation before we move forward on this tonight, because after the discussion we've had, it is unclear. And I feel like some of this is from, like you said, our 2019, and some of it is from, you know, when you look at when can you return with COVID, and it has all those ands, and one of those ands is fever-free for 24 hours. And I think that it's maybe a combination of both of those being in there. But I do think we need to figure out how to rewrite this tonight so that it adequately reflects what we expect for isolation. Because I'm not sure anywhere in our plan it does really state what's expected if you have COVID. I think we can figure out what that looks like. Because while the document is fluid and there are things that we can change, that doesn't feel like something that should be getting changed throughout the year. I mean, if you have COVID, we need to have something concrete that says here's when you're allowed to come back. And this plan doesn't have that.
I can support that if we can come to the agreement that somehow it just says, if you have COVID, and then what? And
Yeah, and I don't know if that means we need to take like a brief recess and look at what that wording looks like. If that means we table this for just a few minutes and finish the rest of the agenda so that the people who are just here waiting, like maybe Ms. Griffin, who really just wants to talk about getting
Just wants food.
contracts. Yeah. So that, you know, maybe some of those people that don't necessarily want to sit and listen to this entire discussion after they've already worked a full day have that option to leave once we get there. Maybe we can.
so let me ask this, that's a good suggestion, and guidance. Let me ask this, other than trying to address that for tonight, are there any other concerns about passing this agenda item?
Physical distancing, elementary cohorts, I mean, we can just go down the line. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know that we've decided either way, though, that's what I'm saying. It's still kind of open, like, are we, you know, are we open to the visitors?
I think that's the point, we need to, those are
Yeah,
decisions
well, that's what I'm
we
saying,
decide
like-
if we're okay with, yeah.
So, more discussion, more questions on that. Okay. Would it be helpful to take a momentary break and then come back to this, or do you want to keep on the right now?
I mean, I think personally, it would be good if we could table it, if we're allowed to table it for the moment and finish the rest of the agenda. And then we could take a brief recess for anyone who wants the opportunity to leave and then come back to discuss this. I feel a little bit guilty keeping people here who are here for other reasons.
Some parts are comfortable with trying to do that.
Yeah, I might make this recommendation to the board that I think there's a lot of what I'm hearing, and I'm listening to you all talk about this. There's a lot of things in here that we're going to have to really still flesh out and flesh through. I don't know if we can arrive at that maybe tonight. And so certainly we have a committee that is formed. And not only do we have a committee, based on your comments that you've made this evening, my leadership team certainly can take your remarks and comments and work through what a plan would look like. I really am not so sure if we're going to get there this evening.
Yeah.
It is my sense about this, and so I think we need to perhaps just move on. Obviously, if there's no motion, the item rests, and I mean, totally up to you all in terms of procedurally how we do this. If there's no motion, then we move on to the next item, and we go through the agenda, and then it will be something that we'll have to come back on.
Right.
Are we on the time sensitive with?
I got work at 8 a.m.
As far as.
Well, I'm looking to see if Sherry Fair is here.
Is-
So you have thoughts?
We already have a plan that has been approved by the board, and that's what.
So we're good
Yeah,
with
we're
that,
fine with
okay.
the grant.
Here's what, Dr. Hartzler, thank you for that suggestion. What I think I'd like to do is set this one aside for the moment, continue on with the rest of the agenda, do take a break then. But I do think, because this is our only venue to have discussion, to at least continue this discussion, so that, Dr. Hartzler, you may take even more comments back to the committee.
I agree.
Okay. Mr. Bouchette?
I'm dismissed.
Alright. Item 3, the took off. I'm going to move on to item 4 for the moment. Consider and take action on the purchase of graphing calculators from EIA Education in the amount of $200,036 from bond fund. Dr. Nelson.
Yes, on behalf of Dr. Biddle, I'm presenting this item. Recommend that you approve the purchase of the graphing calculators. This is 2,030 calculators. What this does is it makes every student from Algebra 2, and they really start using graphing calculators extensively, on up to pre-calculus and calculus statistics levels. We go 1-to-1 on the graphing calculator. They look like this, school bus yellow. And they're not the kind of thing you just want to keep, you just use it when you need it. Students can take it home. They can also use it on the ACT, SAT, and AP exams, the TI-84. So it's an industry standard for this use. They last a long time. The only thing we have to do is buy batteries for them occasionally. And so that's our recommendation.
Couldn't you not order those in red?
That's good. I don't think it was available.
As a parent, you had to buy the $100 graphing calculator from a child back with me at that point.
Yes.
I think that it's a great idea to remove that barrier.
It does. It really is an equity issue in terms of the accessibility of the tool for our students. We did check them out, but this really just makes it a standard tool.
Move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Dr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Consider and take action on an agreement with Oklahoma State Department of Education and Public Consulting Group, Inc. for Medicaid school-based health services, blanket purchase orders in the amount of $52,000, Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, and $15,000 for the Public Consulting Group, and authorize the Director of Special Services, Lindsay Smith, to execute the contract.
Yes, good evening, Vice President Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, members of the board. I am recommending that you approve the renewal agreement with Oklahoma State Department of Education and Public Consulting Group for Medicaid school-based health services. This renewal agreement will allow the district to participate in the Medicaid fee-for-service program. It will also allow us to be reimbursed for therapy services provided here at Union. And since January, in only 6 months, we have been reimbursed a little over $65,000. We are also hoping to expand our reimbursement capacity and include the Medicaid Administrative Claiming Program, which will reimburse the district on administrative duties associated with healthcare related services. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have.
I was a little unclear what the fees are for if we're getting reimbursed. Like sorry.
No, that's fine. So the partnership is with the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, and they have a standard fee of 25.81% that they take off the top. And then we have a partnership with PCG, and they utilize a system through EdPlan that we already have, just a program that we use on a regular basis. And then once the OHCA takes their portion, then PCG goes back in and they take the additional 10% as the administrative cost.
So are these then both third-party groups, and these are their fees to administer the program for us, and we get the remainder of the reimbursement?
Correct, the only third-party group would be PCG.
Okay.
The Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, this is just part of the Medicaid billing program that was a standard contract that was set by the State Department.
Okay.
Move to approve. Second.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Consider and take action on a 2-year license agreement with NCS Pearson for the Digital Assessment Library for Schools Plus. That's DALS Plus in the amount of $66,130 from bond funds.
Yes, and I'm also recommending that you approve an agreement with Pearson for a digital assessment library utilized by both our school psychologists and by our speech pathologists to utilize nationally normed assessments that are accessible online as opposed to the paper pencil test. This will streamline our ability to communicate with parents and to score any assessment protocols in a much faster way. And eliminates any time when test protocols are re-normed, we don't have to purchase an additional kit or go back to the paper pencil. By accessing the online systems, we are able to have the updated norming data available to us.
So I know this is normally like a big, huge part of the time commitment at the beginning of the school year for all of these professionals. Any idea, and I'm not gonna hold you to a number, like what are we talking about as far as how much time this is likely to save them versus having to do everything by paper? Because I feel like it should be a significant number.
Yes, and I'm not a practicing school psychologist, but I know that just the hand grading component is very time consuming, especially when norming data is changed. So by able to have this be an online assessment, it streamlined the entire process. And in fact, most of the universities around the state are starting to train any of the graduates that they have to use this system as well, because this is going to really replace any of the paper pencil process that was in place previously.
I think that's great, because I've been in buildings at the beginning of the school year, and I know this is a huge time commitment for all of those staff members. So move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
The chair votes yes as well.
Thank you.
Consider and take action on the additional expenditure of $154,000 from bond funds to purchase textbooks and software for the 2021-2022 school year.
Yes. Good evening, Board of Education, Dr. Hartzler. I am requesting, it's pretty straightforward, $154,000 from bond funds to purchase textbooks and software for the 21-22 school year. If you recall, last month in June, I had requested a total of $950,000. That was our new allocation for textbooks and software. And we had a balance from the 20 school year that we would like to spend this next school year, and that's $154,000.
Any questions? Motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Second.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Consider and take action on the additional expenditure of $956,685.52 from general funds to purchase textbooks and software for the 2021-2022 school year.
Yes, this is very similar to the previous request, and so from our state textbook allocation from the previous school year, for the school year 2020, we had a carryover of $423,627.01. We actually, for this next school year, instead of the usual $750,000, we received $1,283,000.58.51. So when we take the additional allocation plus our carryover from last year, that exceeded the $750,000 that I requested in June. So I am now asking for the difference in $956,658.52.
685.52, but what's the
Yes.
$2 there?
Yeah, yeah, 685.52, that is correct.
Appreciate the precision. I assume Dr. Williams has checked and double checked the math.
Yes, I know the 1 penny. We will spend that.
Move for approval.
Second.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Consider and take action on the purchase of a 2-year renewal of the Renaissance software subscription in the amount of $243,417.84 from bond funds.
Yes, Mr. Kinnear, Dr. Hartzler, and the board. This is Renaissance Learning's software products that we use, Star Reading, Star Math, Star Reading Literacy. This is the elementary purchase. It's a 2-year renewal. It's also, it is our RSA, or Reading Sufficiency Act screener. That's required by the state that we have a form of a screener that's approved. This is the one that we use that qualifies for that. It's also used diagnostic reports in math and reading by our teachers, so it's an assessment for those core curricula. We've been using it for, I think, a little more than a decade as our standard software. We have looked at other software. We plan next year even to pilot, because it does seem to get more and more expensive as we come back to it. But after a review during the year last year, our administrative team, consulting with their teachers, preferred that we stay with it for this next purchase and then keep shopping. I recommend that you approve the purchase.
Move for approval.
Second.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. Consider and take action on the purchase of a 13-month subscription to Mastery Connect and Item Bank with Instructure Inc. in the amount of $91,625 from bond funds.
Yes, on this one, you may recall in the spring that we actually purchased an assessment system that you approved through Mentoring Minds. And that software company was purchased by another company, which already had an assessment system that they were more willing to invest in. So we had about a 1-week notice, and they did a product end of life on the assessment system. So we didn't actually go through with the purchase. The PO was shut down, and the sales team was apologetic. It was out of their hands. So we were already planning to pilot Mastery Connect and had been making arrangements for that as a desirable product. So what we're recommending is that we move our pilot into an implementation phase a little bit early. And we're prepared to, this does include some training that wasn't in that earlier purchase of the other product because our teachers knew how to use it. So we have a good training package, and our curriculum team, along with any testing and data specialists, are preparing to learn the new product and become trainers of our teachers. We will have a short onboarding training for those that just simply need to learn to administer assessments. And then we'll have more extensive training for those that are ready to go deeper with the software. It does have a capacity for teachers to author their own assessments, short assessments, longer assessments, in order to make more regular assessment of mastery. It tracks the mastery through grade levels, so it has an appeal to us for early literacy data tracking as well, which has been an ongoing need. The system we use right now is rather cumbersome for that. So I recommend that you approve this. We'll transfer our current assessments into this system for this year as well, because we own those.
Is there any concern over how difficult this is going to be for teachers to learn and implement?
Well, yes, so that's our first thought, which is why we'll have a training. Our teachers have been administering online assessments for
Right.
years, they're through it. So those systems are generally have a lot of similarities in them. This one actually is owned by Instructure, which is the Canvas company. It's housed inside of Canvas. So it'll actually be in the system as a tool for secondary teachers. They can access anytime without logging into another piece of software, which was an appeal to us in the first place. So we believe we'll be able to train teachers to use it as an assessment, just to administer district assessments, for example, in 45 minutes to an hour, and even access the basic reports that are in it. And then, of course, our team will be on hand to answer questions. Our department chairs will get a little extra training by our curriculum specialists as they're ready for that. So we think that our teachers are pretty fluent in that, online assessments. This should go pretty well since it's a Canvas tool. But that's a very good question. Thank you.
So will our current system be completely gone and replaced with this, or will there be a period of time where they both exist?
Our current system was gone on July 6th.
Okay.
Right, so we had very little notice, but we still have our assessments, so, and we pulled all the data out of that. So there isn't a way to use the old system at all now to assess our students.
So this is a happy
This is
moment.
it, right, yes.
Okay, my brain was just thinking, we're heading into another unprecedented year, and if it was
Yes.
something we could minimize for those teachers whose strength maybe isn't learning how to navigate a new program on top of everything else, I wondered if that was an option, but
We wish.
with the loss of that previous contract,
Right.
there's now no system.
Our plan was
That's
to
not
have
gonna
it be an option and to pilot this system this year with the volunteers who wanted to do that. So, yeah, we regret that we're having to rush into this. We do anticipate, as those who have looked at the product, believe it's a better product, and they're excited about using it. So we're hopeful that it's pretty smooth.
I know CRT assessments tend to happen at the same time across the whole district. Maybe not every single time, but in general. So is that, I'm assuming that teaching this program is going to happen before we hit that.
Right.
Because
So-
IT and your support people who are going to help with this are not, there won't be enough of them if everybody.
Yeah, this should work within the systems they already use from an IT perspective. Our tests are not a heavy load on graphics or anything like that. We have really until the end of the first quarter to have people be prepared. We have some teachers that have volunteered at the secondary level to administer early, typically do a pre-test, so they'll help us learn from that before we get to the 9-week point that
Great.
we're administering thousands of tests. Very good question.
I'm not surprised at all there's a plan. I just wondered what it was.
And I can appreciate that, yes.
So thank you. Move for approval.
Second?
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Dr. McNeely?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Consider and take action on the purchase of a professional development blended coaching membership with Houghton Mifflin and Hartford in the total amount of $64,740 from federal annual bonus funds.
Yes, thank you. This is a firm we've worked with before. They've done math coaching at our 6th and 7th grade center with the teacher team there. And in this case, we're having them come on site to our 5 sites, our non-title sites that don't have instructional coaches in the building. We'll also involve our instructional coaches so that the coaching that these coaches bring from Houghton and Mifflin will be observed by them so they can also grow and glean from that to take it back to our title sites. This gives our teachers at those non-title sites that have a limited opportunity for instructional coaching. They have 2 on-site visits with an instructional coach, a pre-meeting observation and a post-meeting with them in the fall, I believe in September, and then again around January, February, with some interaction in between, and then our own math curriculum specialist, Melissa Brown, will be visiting the sites in between those times as well to help reinforce and provide feedback and support for those teachers. So we look at it as a great opportunity to really help all of our elementary schools, but provide for a need that's not been met for quite a while.
You often think about the support services that are there for the Title I schools, and sometimes it's hard to recognize it just because the school's not Title I, you still need those services. So I think that's a great idea. I move for approval.
Thank you. Just one question on the qualifications for federal funds on this. Is it because it's Title I primarily?
This is Title II funds, and then we're involving the Title I sites through their instructional coaches. So it really is for all schools at that point, which Title II can be used for all of our schools.
Very good. Thank you. I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Consider and take action on the 3-year renewal of Canvas learning management system from Instructure in the amount of $174,984 from bond funds.
Yes, Vice President Kinnear, Dr. Hartz, members of the board. This is our learning management system that we use in grades 6 through 12. We've used Canvas now. This is going on in year 6. That we've had Canvas in the district. The nice thing about the price on this is the per license price has not increased in the last 6 years. They actually did a state contract last year, and it was the price we've been paying, so we jumped on that state contract and kept the price the same. So it's a great value for what Canvas provides in our district and what we're able to do with it, both in person and virtual learning. This is a great investment.
Move for approval.
Second.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Consider and take action on the purchase of a 3-year license for,
Turnitin.
Turnitin, the feedback studio from Turnitin LLC in the amount of $51,337 from bond funds.
Yes, this is our plagiarism check that we utilize inside of Canvas for most of our secondary students. It allows the teachers, when the students are doing their writing, to check it against. The students can see that it's checked against the internet and all other writings, including stuff from our district. When kids submit, it goes into a library that we check against as well. So big brother can't hand out his paper to little brother, and turn in. It checks that, but it also does grammar checks. It does some basic grammar things that the student can utilize to help improve their writing, because they can see right away how well they're doing. So it's been a good product for us, and again, the price has stayed steady for the last 6 years.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
And since my kids have graduated, I'll vote yes.
Thank you.
Under personnel, consider and take action on the purchase of property insurance for the new stadium from Bank First Insurance Services in the amount of $85,805 from general building funds.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnear. Members of the board, I would recommend that you approve us having property insurance on our beautiful new stadium. Since we are about to take possession of it, we really should insure it so that should something happen, we are able to take care of it.
To approve.
Second.
Yes, one quick question. This is just property only, this is not liability.
Correct. We are still covered on our previous liability for anything that happens there. But since we did not have possession of the stadium, it was not included in our previous property renewal. But as we are about to take it, we feel we should have it covered.
Very good, thank you. So I've got a motion and a second. Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Consider and take action on an agreement with Power School for a master service agreement for software licenses, subscriptions to support the teacher and principal evaluation system and the district's online employment application system in the amount of $109,675.76 from bond funds, and authorize the Executive Director of Human Resources to sign the agreements and initiate payment under these agreements.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnear. This is a 2-year renewal of our current systems that we do for TLE and McCrell evaluations for our teachers and principals, as well as our application system that we use multiple times a day. I don't know how many times we're in it anymore. It's been a great system for us, and it's very easy to use and provides a great service to be able to handle all of these things electronically.
Move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. Consider and take action to name an assistant principal for the 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnear. It is my honor to recommend Ms. Crystal Pounds. Crystal, if you can stand up. Recommend Ms. Crystal Pounds to be named as an assistant principal at the high school. Ms. Pounds comes to us from Danbury, Texas, where she was a principal and also the director of curriculum instruction and assessment. She actually is from the local area, graduated from Bixby. We won't hold that against her. She's figured out where to come. She did attend Northeastern State for her bachelor's degree and got her master's from the University of Texas at Arlington. So I'd like to recommend Ms. Pounds be named the assistant principal at the high school.
Move for approval.
Second.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Consider and take action to name assistant principal interns for the 2021-2022 school year.
It is my honor to recommend a number of interns for this upcoming school year. If I can have you guys stand as I call your name. Miss Ashley Hamilton at Grove Elementary, Alistair Blankenship at Jarman, Celesta Catcher at Jefferson Elementary, Pete Carter at the 8th grade center, and Timber Satterwhite at the high school. My recommendation to recommend these new staff to be administrative interns with the district. We will have them give their speeches after the board meeting, so they'll be prepared. But it's my recommendation that they'll be named interns for this upcoming school year.
Move for approval.
Second.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. And the item we all came for.
We have to let you talk. You waited this long, so.
Consider and take action to award bids for snacks, bread, and food for the 2021-2022 fiscal year from Child Nutrition Fund and approve associated blanket purchase orders for such.
Yes, good evening, Board and Dr. Hartzler. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the award of our snack products to Tanker Sweet and our bread products to Harris Baking, and then the additional foods that weren't submitted to the previous board of Tyson, Buena Vista, and Super Bakery for additional foods, and 7-Up for snacks. We mainly just need to feed the kids. They want snack foods, and even if there's good foods to eat, they want some snacks, and the snacks are good. So thank you.
Move for approval.
Second?
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Consider and take action to award the bid for steamers to Curtis Restaurant in the amount of $63,252.68 from Child Nutrition Fund.
Yes, we currently have two schools, Clark and Bovers, whose steamers are not functioning, and we're going to be very lucky to even get these by the end of September. So we have made alternate plans to cook food that requires steaming, but we really need these steamers. And so if you would please approve these, that would be wonderful.
I just want to point out and reiterate how amazing it is that we can pull $63,000 from our child nutrition fund, and that is a credit to you and your team and the way that you have changed our child nutrition program across the district and made it actually profitable, which is so unusual in the school system. So
Thank you.
Move to approve.
Second.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well said. Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. Consider and take action on a request to raise adult meal prices for the 2021 and 2022 school year.
This is not something I necessarily like to do. It's directed by the United States Department of Agriculture. They pretty much tell us what we have to charge based on what our free reimbursement rate is. And last year we were paid by the summer rates, which were higher. And so that made our adult meal rates have to go up as well. And so this year for breakfast, the current year, last year was $1.90 for breakfast for adults, and this year we're proposing $2. For lunch, last year it was $3.95, and this year we're proposing $4.15, and that's based on the values that our United States Department of Agriculture gave us. If we do not charge those prices, the difference has to come out of some other fund other than child nutrition, and I'm sure that we don't want to do that to any other funds.
Move for approval.
Second?
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
The chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Consider and take action on the purchase of the Tyler Munis SAAS additional environment in the amount of $55,000 from bond funds.
Good evening. This is a recommendation for the board to enter into an additional agreement with Tyler Munis for our financial software system. As you may remember, we brought an agreement to the board a couple of months ago to migrate our existing financial system to the cloud-based system. Approval of this contract will add us to add an additional environment onto our cloud-based system. And we use these environments, we actually have this will be the second train environment, and we have one test environment. We basically duplicate our existing system and use these other environments away from our live data to kind of try things and test things to make sure that they work. This particular environment is going to be used by HR and payroll primarily as they work together and test new facets of the system. This is a 2.75-year agreement. It'll conclude on June 30th of '24 for a cost of $55,000 from bond funds.
And my recollection is also that this greatly enhances our security of these systems as well by moving to such a cloud-based
Yes, it does.
system. So, very good.
Move for approval.
Second?
Dr. McNeil?
Yes.
Ms. McAdams?
Yes.
Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
The chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think at this point, I would entertain a motion to just break, and then we'll come back and pick up item two. So let's plan for a got a 10-minute break. There's a motion and a second to take a break. On belts and suspenders, let's go.
Motion for recess.
Second.
Yes.
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 And I'll vote yes. Thank you. All right, I'll call this meeting back to order, and we will resume our discussion with item 2. And Mr. Bushyhead, appreciate you standing there, but you're welcome to speak from the chair if you'd like. This is a friendly discussion, so however you're most comfortable.
This is wonderful.
Uh,
As long as you can hear me.
So,
You want to put a microphone on, just so the audience can hear.
So I think we addressed at least some of the issues, but again, in the interest of making sure all board members have all concerns addressed, I think maybe this is a good time, first of all, to get all the issues out on the table and then determine if we do have solutions tonight or if we need to just hand over those concerns or issues back to the task force for them to look at. So we'll proceed. Board members, any of you that have some further comments, please feel free to jump in.
Just as a suggestion, might it be easier for like a first round to just sort of go through the plan, like big chunk by big chunk as it's headed, and be like, I've got no problems here, so that we can just know, if we go back to committee, the committee can be like, there were no issues with this section, and
That's a great plan, and Mr. McAdams, I'll just invite you to go ahead and read through that.
okay. So, I mean, I can start with the superintendent letter. Do we feel like it needs, I know Ken, you mentioned at some point you felt like maybe it needed some more information.
Just in honoring Dr. McNeil's request, he noted that there are 3 things in here that our overall plan is to make sure that people are protected, but understand upfront, parents, you do have some choices to make, and at least 3 of those choices include vaccination for 12 and older, wearing a mask, even though state law doesn't allow us to mandate it. There's certainly no restrictions to do so. And I think the last one was choosing the virtual option. So at least making sure that the community, the parents understand, we've built this plan knowing that there are parent choices in mind.
Okay. The return to school update. Do you feel like that needs to have anything added into that wording?
I don't have any issues.
I don't either.
This isn't the actual return, it's just, okay, correct?
Yeah, so at the top of page 3 of the plan where it says return to school update, in that, the wording of that section, do you have, do you feel like we need to add anything into that at this point?
Good here.
Okay, so that item is okay. The reentry task force and input, that's pretty straightforward, but.
No issues there.
Okay. Okay, union learning options. Again, I have no issues.
None.
Okay. Interruptions at school, continuity of academic and non-academic services.
Think whether it's the best place to put it or not, to have a little bit more information about the online option. So there's really definitely not like a specific a section that's like, hey, you know, if you decide to do in person versus online, here's the distinction. And I think it's important for parents to know, is like, you're not at a disadvantage, because this is the work that we put into this online programming. If that's how we feel.
Yeah. Personally, I don't feel like that's the place for that, since this particularly refers to our in-person students. I'm not entirely sure where that would fall, unless it's back up under the learning options section right ahead of it.
Because one of the things that'll come up is that student that you mentioned that misses 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. Well, do they have the option to transition to virtual at that point in time?
Not
They
in
can.
here.
So if they can't, where's the plan for that kid? Do they just stream it? Or?
So, no, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's still a COVID excused absence code.
That is correct.
So they would be excused absences, and they would be treated just like if they were a child at home sick. And the teacher would provide at-home work for that student. What they would be missing is the direct instruction. Yes?
Correct.
So how do parents know that?
That's part,
That's part of our absentee policy too.
Yeah.
Under normal circumstances, if anybody is sick, we have kids that do have some chronic illnesses that are in and out. And when they're absent, it falls into our absentee policy.
Just mentioning that here would be great, so parents know. If it's part of our plan, then we should know how to access that plan, so. Because when parents email me, and I'm like, I don't know, let me ask somebody. If this is the plan and then it's not part of the plan, then it doesn't exist in my mind. So I think that would help.
So under interruptions at school, you would want to include something in there regarding if you are isolated or quarantined because of COVID, this is how your academic instruction would occur during that time?
I say me, but I'm just like, I don't know where else it would go, and I think it would be good. Based on some of the emails that I've gotten from parents, and not like, I don't know how to answer that question for you. If we're just gonna put it at it, see the absentee policy, then I think that would be a good place to put it. If we wanna get a little bit more in-depth information, I think we could go from there.
I think that's a good point. I think that's one of those things that when you've been in district for a while, you just know, like, this is what we do. And if you're a new parent, you don't know. So I don't see that as a problem. And it feels like that's probably either there or under quarantine. I'm not sure where the best place would be to put that, but
As long as
or
it
it could even be in
explicitly
both
stated
places.
somewhere, yeah.
It could even be put in both places, refer to board policy. Somebody maybe knows the number, I don't know it.
It's 50-25.
For absentee.
Is that correct? 50-25. Barbara, you keeping track of all of this? For motion.
I don't think ours has a current hard copy of our plan. This is the old one.
I did pass out hard copies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what
They were attached with the
Got it.
memo, and they were posted online. Yeah, I just passed out the whole one.
Okay.
Do you need a hard copy in order to keep up with the motions?
Yeah, right up there. You sure?
Yeah. Okay.
The last bullet point under community resources, I haven't looked at this sheet particularly, but we do go down the line when it gets into safety strategies, specifically, I think number 6 and number 7. Looking into like this information, once again, like if an opportunity for a kid comes up to get vaccinated, that keeps them in school longer, that eliminates half the other hoops that we have to jump through. That information should be easily accessible. Where do I go? Where is it located? Is it on 81st Street? Is it on 71st Street? What's the schedule look like? just making sure that information is easily digestible and accessible for them. If they want to get a COVID test, where do they go? Do they go to the ER? Do they go community care? Do they go to Ochoa? What is the plan? How do we want to process that flow? So
I will say this, Dr. Miller, you have to be very careful in regards to doing that, because if we say that we're sending someone for a test and the financial obligation of that falls back onto the district, or could potentially fall back on the district. So I think having the information available in terms of, going to their provider, medical provider, or accessing their community health connections clinic, I think would be acceptable. But saying that you should go there, or even inferring that we're wanting you to do that expense could ultimately fall back on the district.
most definitely. Yeah,
So
exactly.
am I correct in saying?
Yes, you are. Yeah. And I mean, the sheet that's accessible on there is also pretty good. There's not an address. So it's kind of like, is this place, is it in the cloud? Is it a physical location I'm going to? Because you got some of our families, they don't think the same way that we do. So being able to make sure that's accessible to them, they might not think to put that straight on their phone and go there. That's it I have for that section.
Any other comments on that, the interruption of school, continuity of academic and non-academic services section? Okay. Definitely health monitoring of your student. I don't know if we want to talk through that now, or if we want to come back to that after we go through the rest of the document and find either way.
I think Mr. Bridget might have some additional information to share in regards to that, clarifying maybe some of the confusion with that.
Well, the health, again, that first paragraph is our general statement of health. Later, we'll talk about quarantining and COVID positive testing. There was a statement that was left off of that regarding, and it's on page 8. There's one sentence right above, I'm sorry, page 8 of the 2020 document I gave you. And the statement was intentionally left to be short, and the main guideline is CDC protocol, because CDC protocol changes quite often. And even if you look at the key takeaways, which I think was publicized in July, there's even links on exceptions to the protocol. So it gets a little complicated. If those students have a mask on, they're within, outside of 3 feet, not considered close contact, they get, so. I would prefer we keep that link, and that's how we would update it.
So I'm not following exactly Mr. Bush.
So on page 8, right above safety strategies, there's one simple sentence there that says union will be following CDC protocols in the event that students or staff receive a positive COVID test. That would be what I would recommend.
So where is it going in the?
I would put it under the quarantine procedures where it is on the older document when we get to page 6.
Okay.
So, but in this health monitoring section, first of all, I don't think it would be inappropriate to put that link in both places. But I think we also need to fix this top sentence that assumes that if you go home with COVID-19 symptoms, you can return to school if you've been fever-free for 24 hours. Because first of all, not everybody even runs a fever with COVID. So, I mean, I know that a lot of people do, but it's not always a symptom. You could still be symptomatic without a fever, I believe. And I mean, 24 hours doesn't necessarily meet the CDC guidelines for proper isolation. And I feel like we all agree on that. This just does not if we want this top sentence to state our general absence plan of, if you have non-COVID symptoms and are sick, then you can return to school up to 24 hours, that's fine. But if we're talking about COVID symptoms, then I think we need to look at, you need to isolate for 10 days and provide a negative test or provide a negative test. I feel like we had it in here somewhere last year because I remember, or maybe it was one of the links we had.
It's under correctional procedures on the last one, and it's the last, second to last sentence. And this one, the current one, on the last line, first paragraph under health monitoring of your student, where it says should not be sent to school until they are fever-free. It should not be sent to school for 10 days and until they are fever-free for 24 hours. That's the current guideline.
And I think we want to be careful on saying 10 days. I agree, we shouldn't say 24 hours, but I think for that particular item, if CDC guidelines change, I would rather have a reference to CDC guidelines instead of what the CDC guidelines currently say. Does that make sense?
It does, but what's the point of having a task force if the task force doesn't mobilize on current information?
Well, what's the point in putting it in writing if it's going to change?
To act as an operating guide for what we're doing next week.
And then force us to reconvene when the CDC puts out a new memo.
That's a pandemic. That's what we're here to do.
I understand, so rather than us doing that, I would rather just acknowledge that the CDC has set out guidelines. I think it's important for us to communicate to the student when that happens, that here's what CDC guidelines say.
That's true, but if we're gonna do that, we can't pick and choose half the guidelines. We have half the guidelines. And then we don't have any social distancing, any masks. So you can't pick and choose the ones that we want, like it's a grocery store. We have to-
Actually, we can. We actually can.
Then what is the point of referencing the CDC if we're not gonna
So
follow?
the CDC that we are following is if somebody has been diagnosed positive COVID, right?
That's not what this said.
I don't disagree with you there, but as far as, I'm looking for consensus here. I'm saying it as a truth, but I don't know that. I think we're in agreement that if a student tests positive, we are defaulting to what those CDC guidelines are.
In here, it says students with a fever or prominent symptoms of COVID. It doesn't say anything about testing positive.
I understand what it says, and I'm proposing what it should say.
So only people who test positive for COVID are going to be sent home for 24 hours.
So work with me on that. No, not 24 hours.
10 days.
So it is, we're all going to do 10 days.
We're going to do, if you're speaking truth, I believe you. I don't know for a fact, I haven't read it today that says 10 days. I believe you because I trust you, but I don't want to put 10 days in there if in fact it changes tomorrow, it's 9 days or 6 days. So I'm comfortable saying that we will follow those guidelines, but I'm not comfortable with specifically saying it's 10 days.
So you're saying as they shift, we shift, because that's the guideline we're
Yes.
following. So
Here-
the boat takes a left, we're going left.
Here's the issue with that. If you say, we're gonna follow the CDC guidelines for the health monitoring of your student, the CDC guidelines don't just say, oh, don't worry about the mask, don't worry about the vaccination, just think about.
So I agree, so let's isolate these issues, right? We're isolating the issues right now between, somebody that has COVID, right? I mean, that's what we're dealing with right now. And I believe we're all in agreement, I could be wrong, that if somebody has COVID, that isolation period is what we are recommending, or what our policy is.
Here's, just in reality, how would they know that they have COVID?
A positive test.
Where would they get a positive test?
They'd have to go get one. And though you are qualified to make that diagnosis, That's not our job.
I'm not saying it is. I'm saying if they have a positive test, the hospital or the clinic is gonna tell them to quarantine for 10 days. We don't have to say anything. But that's not the problem. It's the other kid who hasn't gone to the hospital and is short of breath and that's the whole point. That's why we do contact tracing. That's why we have social distancing. If we knew they were positive, they wouldn't be at school in the first place. That's like hindsight 2020. Like, if they're already sick, they have a positive COVID test, why would they be in school? We would know that. And the hospital will tell them, don't go to school, stay at home, because they got a positive test. So like, that doesn't make sense. We're looking for the kid who has symptoms who hasn't gone to the hospital. That's the Trojan horse.
So should it say until they have a negative test?
I think JD can weigh in on this here.
Can I ask a question? Because
Sure.
what I'm hearing you recommend is anybody who has a symptom stay home for 10 days.
What we're recommending is that this says what the CDC says, if it's gonna quote the CDC. It says, if you have COVID symptoms, you probably have COVID, you should follow the CDC guidelines.
Yeah, which the CDC guidelines say 14 days unless the local thing says 10. But if just going from running the school every day and the number of kids, the number of staff who talk, if that's a symptom now, which it wasn't before. So if a child is coughing, we're sending most of our elementary students home for 10 days every day.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What you have to do is provide a spectrum of illness. What is subjective is fever. What are we gonna measure is fever. If a kid coughs, like, okay, do you have a tickle in your throat or are you sick? We're not asking you to diagnose anything, but if a kid's going to the nurse feeling ill and feeling short of breath, they have a line of symptoms that says, man, they're probably sick. Either you're gonna go home, they're probably not gonna come to school, and if they happen to have COVID, we're gonna call everyone's parents and be like, hey, your child has been exposed to COVID. That's what we know. What we're trying to do is educate the family. If your kid has these things before he gets on the bus, don't come to school, stay home for 10 days. That's the plan. We know what to do. It's business as usual. But we're trying to prevent these things from happening, and we're trying to give a plan to the public. This is not for us. This is for them. And so that's what I'm trying to make sure that we all understand is when we present this plan, we're gonna follow the protocol that allows us to do the best job that we can.
But trying to operationalize that into a school where parents still send their kids to us who have the fever, who are sick, regardless, knowing all this, and us turning around and trying to have to send them back, I'm not sure. We quarantined 13,487 people last year. That was with 5,000 kids virtual. We've only got 300 and some kids virtual this year, so we're near our 16,000 kids. I can't imagine. I got calls from the nurses probably 3-4 times a day asking, what do we do? We followed the guidelines as best they can. They change every 2 weeks on the CDC. But if now we're saying if you have some of these symptoms, you need to go home for 10 days, that's a lot longer than saying, oh, the doctor said it's not COVID, you can go back to school. Because the CDC doesn't say that anymore. They used to say that. They've changed that.
What also is different this year from last year? Experience and a vaccine. Like, we're not just picking kids out of random, like, oh, you have a cough, go home, like, and then it's a mass horde back home. It's using the same things that we do every day. Is this kid sick or not? Hey, you can't pay attention to class because you can't breathe. Like, that's what we're looking for. At the same time, it's a level of protection to make sure that the kid who is sick and comes into school, we know what that looks like. We've seen the usual suspects. We're educating the family. Once again, this is not for us. It's for our families.
But our staff has to use this to make those determinations.
And we're already doing it well. Why would we deviate from last year?
Because the variants have changed. We can't wear masks and we can't ask have you been vaccinated? We can't track that.
What does that change though? What is that? Everyone in here, almost everyone, is wearing a mask. Almost everyone in here is vaccinated. we're ahead of the game. We have a system set in place. We know what last year was like. We know we can do better. So why would we regress and say, okay, we can't have a mask, so let's put all the desks back together, let's have all these mass gatherings, let's kind of set ourselves up for another variant.
And I'm not talking about those pieces. I'm talking about the operationalization of this process. Because this decision that gets made by this committee and the board has to translate down to the schools, down to the teachers, down to the nurses, to my staff who made over 50,000 calls last year on quarantining people. So when we're doing that, we have to have a process that this is what we're doing and why we're doing it and be able to explain it.
Right.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that if you have some of these symptoms, you need to be out for 10 days. Well, it's not that easy.
I'm not saying it is, but they're either gonna go to the school or they're gonna come to me. What are we trying to do? The process for them is to simply be able to find kids that are sick and haven't been diagnosed yet and make sure they don't make other kids sick. Like, that makes your job easier. Because you don't have a kid coming in that gets 10 more kids sick and then a mass exodus. This is not, let's find every kid that's sick and try to send them home. It's just like, this is an operating standard. This is the CDC protocol. We can't say, let's use the CDC protocol and then not use the CDC protocol. If we're not gonna use it, then just take it off and everybody's happy. But if we're gonna say it for legal purposes, then let's do it right. That's it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We can't put it on there if we're not gonna follow it. And we can't put half of it. That's dead wrong. And there's no point in having a COVID task force if the task force isn't accomplishing some task of preventing COVID.
When was the last update, Sandy, that you just sent me? August 4th?
That one outline that I showed you.
So this paragraph right here that you guys are talking about.
It is August.
Huh? August
It's
4th?
August.
That you're discussing, I can almost guarantee you at one point came from the CDC website.
24 hours.
The information that we collected, that's where it came from. And again, as much as we try, I know that's all she's reading, I know that's all the Federline's reading, as much as we try, there are some of these things that change, right? And so when you say we can't pick and choose, we cannot publish the entire CDC document. Because the one I've got in here is 16 pages and it's a takeaway sheet, which is meant to be a summary. Each one of those pages has at least 5 links on it, right? So it is not possible, which is why in some of this wording, we've said we would, when practical, right? Because some of this is not possible for us to do. And so our ultimate goal, yes, our safety of our students is priority number 1. But we also are missing our mission if we set ourselves up to not be able to have school. And that's exactly what I'm fearful that we're going to do, right? And that's where the decision's difficult. But like that on the 24 hours, you're probably right. This was likely cut out of CDC guidelines that were provided to us at some point, right? So it needs to be changed. I mean, I understand that. I think we're still going to get to the big discussion, and that is if a kid shows symptoms, are they sent home for 10 days? Your take is the assumption that if that child has symptoms, the assumption is that child is COVID positive until they show signs different. And those signs are lined out by the CDC, right? Sandy just sent me, and Mr. Federline just sent me the new flow chart, which is a little different than the one we had attached to last year's plan, which kind of goes through the steps, right? And there are 3 things that they have to meet. I don't remember what they were. So
The only difference in what we're saying is, I'm saying it's 10 days because that's what the governing body of science is saying, and you're saying 24 hours for the same thing.
Well, and I agree with you. We take the paragraph out, but it's not going to cause us to avoid the discussion that has to happen. are we gonna follow CDC guidelines on quarantine?
Right.
And if we are, then we're gonna have some pretty definite guidelines on how that's gonna happen. And what I think Jay is saying is,
Is it feasible?
it's gonna create some issues.
The amount of financial documents that we get to read for this, these meetings are very thorough. They spare no expense in terms of, this is the most updated information to the cent. The percentage changed by 0.01 yesterday. That is what we do, and we're on top of it. What is different now? The
With
CDC.
this, I am.
It's just new. It's new. It's uncharted territory.
I'm not an MD.
And
I'm not, I'm just saying, I've got a full-time job.
Right, right, right.
He has a full-time job.
But does
Stay up with.
does that mean our kids suffer?
No,
Because-
I think we're in an effort where we're doing the best that we can.
Yeah, and I mean, but that's it. Like, if there's something that we're missing, then my initial point in all of this, let's fill the gaps. If we don't have the oversight to say, hey, we're missing part of this first paragraph, and all we have to do is add it in, what are the consequences of adding it in? That's the conversation. I'm not asking anyone to and I'm not an MD either, I'm a DO. I'm not asking anybody to go in and do this full time. I'm just asking, if we are going to say it, then we need to do it. That's the same thing we ask of our kids. If we're gonna say that this is our plan and we don't follow it, then what is the point? What are we talking about? There's no point in putting it in there if we're not gonna follow it up. And right now, the information that's in there is wrong. And if we're gonna put the right information in there, let's do it right. If we're gonna put no information in there, then let's just follow as is. But those are the options. There is no halfway. We can't put half the science in there, because otherwise we're no different than the conversation we heard earlier. Take your pick.
Appreciate your opinion, I appreciate the distinctions. I might respectfully disagree on that we're no different. There are some very tough choices to make in here that maybe don't get us all the way to the CDC guidance, some of which are mandated by state law, others which are resonant just in respect for parent choice. I do respect immensely the position that you were in, and certainly the candor and experience you have to offer to this. I'm concerned about being able to reach any type of motion this evening for any of this document. And I know we've proposed some things tonight. What I think I might do, and Dr. McNeil, I think we certainly have your direction well stated. I think maybe if there are some other pressing points in here, let's get those raised, and I might suggest that the task force reconvene, having soaked in all of this, and Dr. Hartman, if need be, you can always call a special meeting in the next few days.
And we're making notes on these on, I mean, I just have to go. It's, the committee just has to read some more. I mean, because again, the latest information we just got was August 4th. Right? Today is August 9th. And so, we can't assume that the information that they've given us and changed it or not. So there is the obligation to go and try to stay up with this. I will tell you that that is a very, very difficult task when the people that are working here have other responsibilities to also go to this school. So it's hard to do that.
Yeah. I will say this, and this is, I know it's a benign statement, but it also speaks to being intentional. Put me on the task force. I'll update it for you. That's my job. That's what I do. That's what I bring to the district. If that helps
Can I
us.
tell you, that's the most wonderful thing you've said all night.
Wonderful? I'm happy to do that. But at the same time, you know, just looking at this, we'll go through it. This is my reading off of the CDC website. Yes, it's an opinion, but it's also the only thing that we miss as we look at this is and it's underlined at the end of the statement. It's this symptom and this. And the only thing that was taken is the second bullet point. So as we look at that, that's the conversation that we'll go back to. As we go into these other sections, everything caters around the point that we're trying to make. We can't tiptoe through this. It's either this is our stance or we're here. It's very black and white, because at the end of the day, that's what our families, that's what they deserve. Either we're for this or we're against it, and the mask is just something that we can't control.
And I'll say, and again, this is the beauty of this governing body getting to make this vote. With those decisions will come consequences. There will not be we cannot make the assumption that every parent is going to like the idea that we're going to quarantine their kid for 10 days every time they come in close contact with a student that tests positive or with a step. So that's, again, we've talked about those things, and that's why it is hard not to pick some of these things, because we're trying to line out the guidelines, right? I mean, we've not even talked about the mask on buses, right?
But, you know, at the end of the day, we all know this because we all saw the board meetings last year. That camera is not gonna lie. They know what I've said, they know my stance. When we vote, they will know your stance. That is it. Don't worry about who the boogeyman is. Don't worry about what parents say, like, do what's right. And then let the opinions be the opinions. We do what's right for the kids. That's it. And so if they don't like what I have to say, that's fine, because I'm gonna love on their kid. I'm gonna be in the ER when they get sick. I'm gonna take care of them, and I'm gonna keep the standard of care. And then we're all gonna do the same thing here in the education setting. But let's not worry about it. Who's upset? Who's upset? We can't control that. They're gonna email us regardless.
Well, I mean, I'll say this, I would have an issue as the parent of a child that got sent home for 10 days as a first grader.
Yeah,
And when I get a call 3 weeks later and he got sent home for 10 days as a first grader, I'm gonna have an issue with that, because I did not choose stay-at-home learning. I chose in-person learning. And as a parent, making that decision about my child, I would take issue. So again, I'm not saying that just because I'm worried about your emails. I'm saying that because I truly, personally, would have an issue with a first grader that's supposed to be learning, being sent home for 3 10-day periods.
And I might add to that, that is the difficultiness of these decisions and a plan like this, is that certainly the landscape of things from a micro causal standpoint has changed, in that last year there was a lot of assistance that was laid out from the government to assist families, to assist schools and employees who had to be quarantined. Those funds are gone. Okay, those funds no longer exist. So to Mr. Bushyhead's point, when we're having to potentially call a parent to say, you need to quarantine your child, then that parent sometime is going to be left with a hard choice to say, I now have to stay home, and knowing that I might not be able to pay my rent or my mortgage or provide for the food that you know my kids need. That's what we're struggling with, and I so appreciate all of your opinions and you know your thoughts in regard to this. But know that these are very, very difficult decisions that, yes, we're trying to look after the health and well-being of our students and our staff and so forth, but then we're also trying to take into account the conditions that some of our kiddos who are obviously in elementary school, what we're subjecting them to when we say, you're now home for 10 days. That's a concern, and it weighs heavily, trust me, on our teachers' minds, our principals' minds, and certainly I know all of your minds, the board members and the parents, that not all of our students are well positioned, let me just say that, to be able to be sent home for 10 instructional days or 10 days so that we can follow these quarantines. And I know this is a very difficult decision. So I do think that we're probably not going to arrive at where we need to be this evening, and that's just fine. I think Mr. Bushyhead, Dr. McNeil will take you up on your offer. And I think that we've got to go back to revisit our plan and to look at it and to then come up with a recommendation that we then in turn need to bring back to the board before next Wednesday, August 18th, because certainly our parents are going to need some direction. And as we all know, not everybody has to be in agreement with what we're recommending, and that is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But we have to arrive at a place or a direction by next Wednesday on August 18th, when our families and our students are going to report to our school sites. So that's kind of what Mr. Kinnear, I would recommend is that I don't know, I think we're going to have to probably table this issue because we're not going to arrive at even going through all of the motions that would need to occur for us to even get to this place. I don't think we're going to end up there this evening. I think this is something we come back on tomorrow and we start fleshing through with the idea that we would then call I would call a special board meeting to offer up another plan with the changes based on dialogue this evening, and then we'll go with what the board decides, regardless of the position that each of you are respectfully a part of.
I think that's a fair plan.
I still feel like it's worth us going through these remaining items, because if nothing else, the changes that we would like to see voted on, that would become motions later tonight, could be presented to the committee and altered that way before it comes back for a vote.
I think we have to be careful about asking if we're agreeing on these things. I think the points can be made to me and to certainly my leadership team or my cabinet, and then we will take them in and incorporate in them. But we can't, keep going to try to find consensus, obviously, as we go through the plan.
And please feel you don't have to persuade me. I'm very, I would have to report back to my attendings and be like, well, why did you deviate from the standard of care to please the masses? Like, so this is what I'm trained to do. So I understand the position that you're in. Please don't feel like you gotta persuade. That's why we have a full board. I'm probably not gonna be persuaded. I'm supposed to be the little angel on your, not to say everyone else is a demon, but I'm supposed to be up here on your shoulder, being that other side. So I want it to be polarized so that way this is the governing, this is the other governing body, this is how we're doing it, this is what you would expect to see in a hospital setting. This is what the most up-to-date regulations on COVID are. With that, I'll be quiet.
Ms. McAdams, any further comments?
Well, I would say I would like for the committee to look at some of the big things we've mentioned, like physical distancing as it would relate to, assemblies and things like that, which also then sort of rolls right into cohorts. And then at what level are we allowing visitors? I feel like that's something else that needs to be, and either Mr. Reyes or myself will need to step down from the committee in order to let Mr. McNeil have a seat, which I think is the right thing to do. And I'm willing, I served on it last year, so if you would like to continue on it this year, I'm willing to step down. But, so that's why I want to make sure I say something about the pieces that I feel are still important to be reconsidered.
Well, I'm just gonna ask, I appreciate the offer, and certainly everybody's willing to accept your joining that committee, but we've got a situation where we've had a committee together for a long time that's worked through a number of these, and now all of a sudden we've got a board member inserting himself into that process to take complete ownership. Is that the way we want to operate?
Well, first of all, I'll say that the committee doesn't work as everybody bows to what one person says. It's a dialogue.
I understand,
So-
but now we do have, and Dr. McNeil, you stated it affirmatively, you are jumping in to take over the process.
No. I'm not jumping in to take over anything. I'm jumping, we said that we wanted, like, how do we keep up to date with this thing? It's not my job. I said it is my job. So I would help with making things easier and giving that other opinion. So I'm not taking over anything,
Okay.
but I will offer my time and my voice. And if you choose to listen to it like that, that's completely up to whoever wants to listen.
So if you're not comfortable with that, obviously, any input you want to give to the committee.
You don't have to be on the committee.
You don't have to be on the
No,
committee.
no.
Yeah.
I want to correct something, because I take offense to this when my report said this. I did not make the comment, this is not my job.
Sorry.
I made
sorry.
the comment that I have a lot of other responsibilities.
This is true. My apologies. But this is my job.
So, on the committee, not on the committee.
I mean, if it's up to a vote, then it's up to a vote. I said I would offer my time.
I think the committee is established. I would say that it stays and it stays in place. But that does not preclude us from having conversations with Dr. McNeil and saying, what is your guidance? What is your recommendation? At that point, we need to do that rather quickly here in the next few days. We're in daylight here, as we know. The kids are coming here on Wednesday, whether we're ready or not, we're gonna be ready. But we can certainly reach out to you to get some guidance, and then we'll go back to the committee to say that the board, we did not get a motion. To my knowledge, I don't think we're gonna arrive at a motion. So, the item is just an item, right? It's not effectuated. So then we will come back with a special board meeting, between now and before next Wednesday, to propose then a new revision or a new plan to the board, and then we'll go from there.
We need to be ahead of that teacher.
Oh, I got you.
I don't think we need a plan for meeting the teachers, because that is again one of those administrative calls that we will make to say, here's what we're going to do in light of what we think we should do.
Does anybody recall how much time is needed to post for a special meeting?
48 hours.
48, so the earliest we could reconvene is today's Wednesday, practically Thursday.
Correct.
And, honestly, I've got other things to do too, so we reconvene this thing. It's not gonna be practical, but we'll figure it out.
Do you know how long Stacy's been?
I think Mr. Van will be back this week. So I'll try to reach out.
I mean, if it's easier, I can send you all my recommendations on paper. Like, that way you don't have to hear me talk. You can just, this is what it is, and then move from there. But I mean, I would also invite you to look at what some other schools are doing. Normally, we lead the pack on these things, but as we are trying to figure out, as we want to do, I beg you to consider the actual question. It doesn't matter the amount of days, 10 days, 3 days, whatever. Like, if you're gonna do it right, then do it right. But the question is, do we wanna mandate it, or do we wanna suggest it? That is the ultimate question. Are we wanna be the authority, or we want to be passivity on it. That's it.
Yeah, I will speak from my job perspective. I'm not a mandate person. I don't have that background. You do. If anybody does have authority or experience to be a mandate person, you do. I do not, and do not feel comfortable being in that position.
I mean, I don't mandate anything. It's like, hey, like, if you take aspirin, you can help your chest pain. Like, I can't force you to feel down your throat. So, same way, I think we just need to just consider that. And like I said, I'm happy to write it down, offer it out. If that's the easiest way to assist the task force at this time and expedite the process before school goes here.
I think that's a good suggestion. I'm gonna run through these items and, new business.
No new business.
Opportunity for comments from the audience and board members. Any other comments? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.